If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 61. The restoration of the sacred icon is complete. Normal schedule will start 1 chapter per day plus 500 PS equals 1 chapter. Arla's response left the factory manager a bit puzzled. An overseer? That's almost the lowest level of management. It barely counts as a management position at all. He had initially thought that even if Arla wanted to become the factory manager, he could grit his teeth and agree. After all, he could just give her an empty title, one that wouldn't involve any real responsibilities, or assign someone capable to assist her. But he really didn't expect her to choose to be an overseer. Arla, are you sure you want to be an overseer? Absolutely. Would you like to reconsider? Arla shook her head firmly in response. She wanted to be an overseer. As a worker, her daily life consisted of working on the assembly line in the workshop, day after day, assembling the mechanical components required by the King's Court district. During breaks, she could only walk along a fixed route back to the living quarters assigned by the factory. She had almost no personal time at all. One could say that the small assembly line workshop was her entire world. Her daily interactions were mostly limited to the overseers who oppressed her with whips. For her, being an overseer was the best position she could imagine. She remembered how her father used to boast when he was alive, saying that he worked the hardest and would surely become an overseer one day. Little did they know that management positions within the factory were mostly reserved for those from the upper hive. People like them, from the lower hive, hardly had any chance of becoming managers. A worker was just a worker, destined to remain so for life. As someone from the upper hive, the factory manager could not comprehend Arla's choice. He couldn't fathom that she might not know about any other positions besides being an overseer. This was the gap created by their different social classes. Seeing Arla's determination, the factory manager sighed and replied. All right, Arla, I respect your choice. From now on, you are an overseer. Someone will come shortly to handle the paperwork and explain how to carry out your duties as an overseer. As for your area of responsibility, it will be the third assembly line where you used to work. Of course, if you ever change your mind, feel free to come find me. An overseer, hey? Well, in any case, she'll still be the most powerful overseer in the factory. Once she gets the hang of it, I'll find a chance to promote her slowly. The factory manager thought to himself. At that moment, Arla barely heard the factory manager's words. She was already completely immersed in the joy of becoming an overseer. He. She was the best Arla ever. Her father never achieved it, but she did. Thank the God Emperor. And thank the merciful governor. Achoo! Who's thinking of me? On the balcony of the Spire mansion, Eden suddenly sneezed. He rubbed his nose and looked towards the holy square. What met his eyes was the towering and majestic 100-meter-tall statue of the God Emperor. It had once been desecrated by heretics, left in ruins. That represented the suffering and humiliation endured by the King's Court district, and even the Imperium itself, during this catastrophe. Due to the great rift in the warp, nearly half of the Imperium's territories had fallen into darkness, ravaged by Xenos, heretics, and chaos demons. Urth was one such world. But now, the statue of the God Emperor had been preliminarily restored, returned to its original grandeur. Only the final gilding and gemstone inlay remained. This was a symbol, the first step in a great crusade. He, Eden Grant, ruler of Earth and the planetary governor of the Imperium, would begin to reclaim the planet and save other worlds from the dark side of the Imperium. In the Holy Square, Baef directed the artisans as they made the final preparations. These artisans were tasked with decorating the entire Holy Square, raising flags, laying out luxurious carpets, and more. They also had to complete the gilding and inlay of gemstones on the statue of the God Emperor before the night of the Emperor's Ascension Day. Fortunately, everything was progressing smoothly, and they would meet the deadline. Baef looked up at the statue of the God Emperor and couldn't help but pray. God Emperor above, please bless us. Bless us that, under the leadership of the governor, we may emerge from this terrible darkness. For the past 5 years, Baef had been in a state of despair. As the Grand Chamberlain of the King's Court district, he was fully aware of the dire situation. He knew that there was no hope left for the King's Court district. Its most likely fate was to fall into chaos and be overtaken by the Hoffman family. But the Hoffman family, with their schemes and short-sighted incompetence, had no chance either. They had already been tainted by chaos. Their control over the king's court district would only make things worse. Ultimately, Urth would not escape the clutches of chaos and face total destruction. In the face of such despair, the governor had long since abandoned hope, neglecting all duties and spending his days in debauchery. But Beowulf, the most loyal servant of House Grant, could not give up. He could not afford to show even a hint of despair, nor let such emotions crush him. Day and night, he worked tirelessly to assist the governor, handling all the administrative duties. Yet all he could do was delay the inevitable, to give the darkness a little more time before it consumed everything. In truth, he had long prepared himself for the end. When the king's court district fell, when the last of the Grant bloodline perished, he and his family would go with them. It would be their final act of loyalty. But since that attack, the governor had changed after losing his memory. He started taking care of official matters and trying to save the king's court. These past days, Beowulf had been observing the governor. He initially thought the governor had turned to the dark gods of chaos, which explained the sudden change. But regardless, it was a good thing. As long as the Grant bloodline continued, even if it meant following them into corruption, Beowulf would not hesitate. However, over time, he dismissed that idea. The governor, in fact, showed greater care for his people than even his father had. This was not the behavior of a chaos follower. Rather than believing that the governor had turned to chaos, Beowulf preferred to believe that the governor had been blessed by the god emperor. That was why he had changed so much, becoming more compassionate and wise, and gaining godlike, mysterious powers. Seeing the recent changes in the king's court district, Beowulf's despair had gradually faded. Although the situation was still tough, he believed the governor would perform more miracles and lead the district out of danger. At the entrance of the cathedral, Bishop Doni leaned on his staff as he walked out. He gazed at the newly restored statue of the god emperor, tears streaming down his face. It was finally restored. Not only had the statue been repaired, but the emperor's Ascension Day festival, which had been cancelled for years, was being held once again. The church would proceed to the holy square to bless the people, distributing sacred bread and water. All of this was thanks to the governor, and Bishop Doni was becoming increasingly convinced that he was the one chosen by the god emperor. The all-knowing, all-powerful god emperor had shown Urth the way. And they, the emperor's loyal followers, had only to follow the one chosen by the emperor. The sword in his hand would cleave through the darkness and lead the faithful into the light. Bishop Doni gazed at the grand statue of the god emperor, his heart swelling with devotion. To the chorus of the seraphim, he fervently recited the hymns of gratitude to the almighty god emperor. Let the emperor's torch burn bright, dispelling all specters of the void. Chapter 62, The Miracle Descends. 500 Power Stones equals +1 chapter. As the emperor's Ascension Day approached, nearly all departments within the king's court district mobilized, working full force to prepare for the grand ceremony. Everyone knew about the ceremony, envying those few who were fortunate enough to be selected to enter the holy square. Many began to regret their past actions. Why hadn't they worked harder? Why hadn't they contributed more to the governor's cause, leading them to miss out on this rare opportunity? Of course, the main topic of conversation among the people was the governor himself. Some said the governor had been blessed by the god emperor. Others claimed that overnight, he had gained divine powers and could kill demons with a single punch. Still, others whispered that the governor had found the mythical bread mountain and intended to ensure no one went hungry ever again. There were even rumors that the governor, after obtaining his extraordinary powers, had spent the night with 10 beautiful women. But this was immediately countered by someone saying it was nonsense. According to their version, the governor had bedded 20 female demons instead. This remark left everyone stunned for a moment, before they quickly scattered in fear. The person who dared to say such outrageous things about the governor quickly shrank back and fled as well, afraid that the enforcers might come to arrest him. Most rumors, however, were whispered in private. One wouldn't want the enforcers to overhear, as that would cause serious trouble. In just a few days, gossip about the governor spread far and wide. Beowulf had suggested arresting and putting on trial those who spoke disrespectfully about the governor, but Eden rejected the idea. The majority of the talk was, after all, favorable to him. Even the most outlandish claims only served to bolster his powerful image. It undoubtedly strengthened the people's trust in him. So the public discussion about him was a good thing, as long as it didn't veer into heretical territory. If they started rounding people up for punishment or even execution, leading everyone to fear mentioning the governor at all, that would be a real problem. It would damage his image of benevolence. In short, whatever the people were saying, let them talk. And so, 2 days passed quickly. The preparations for the Emperor's Ascension Day were completed smoothly, and the Secretariat finalized the list of attendees for the ceremony. That evening, Eden once again stood on the balcony of the spire, watching the craftsmen complete the final touches in the Holy Square. Tonight, they would gild the statue of the God Emperor and inlay the gemstones. By the time the sun rose tomorrow, the statue would shine brilliantly in the sunlight, visible to all residents of the surrounding districts. This was the first miracle Eden had prepared for the people of the King's Court district. Now, all he had to do was wait. Workers across various regions had been notified of their holiday and given ample food. They could rest well, preparing to celebrate the grand festival of the Emperor's Ascension Day tomorrow. Black Coal Street. Laughter echoed from the dim shacks in the depths of the street. Under the faint candlelight, Micah carefully polished his worker's metal, his eyes filled with hope. He glanced at the young boy beside him, now full from a good meal. Ever since Micah received the worker's medal for his exceptional mining, his life had completely transformed. This was a medal personally awarded by the governor, given only to the most outstanding workers. His co-workers were envious, and the way people looked at him had changed. Even the highly respected Mr. Will had come to visit him, bringing food and candles as gifts. Tomorrow, he would join Mr. Will to attend the ceremony in the Holy Square, where they would receive the God Emperor's blessing. After the ceremony, Mr. Will would recommend him to be the team leader of the mining crew. And all of this was thanks to the great and benevolent governor. Drek Residential District, Area C43, small dormitory for workers. Arla was grinning like a fool. These past few days had been the happiest of her life. Not only had she received the governor's commendation, but she had also become an overseer. After being appointed as the overseer of the 3rd Assembly Line, everyone remembered her name. They would never get it wrong again. Unlike the other overseers who ruled with whips, she taught the workers how to do their jobs better. How to work faster and with less effort. She even allowed them a short break. These were methods she had come up with through her own experience, ways to maximize efficiency. Other overseers mocked her in private, expecting her to fail miserably. They believed that without strict discipline, workers would slack off. But reality slapped them in the face. The workers under her supervision worked harder than ever. The 3rd Assembly Line, which she oversaw, had the highest output and best quality. Arla didn't understand why, but no matter what, she had become a highly capable overseer. She knew how to manage people. What she didn't know was that the workers were putting in extra effort because they feared that if the production wasn't good enough, Arla would be reassigned or demoted. And that would mean the return of the cruel overseer who loved to beat them. In any case, Arla was happy. Even more so because tomorrow she would attend the grand ceremony and see the benevolent governor in person. She hugged her worker's medal to her chest, rolling joyfully on her iron bed. He. King's Court District, Administrative Housing Area. The Rapp family was enjoying dinner together. Tonight's meal was sumptuous, a slice of real wheat bread for each person, along with a small portion of meat. This was a gift from the King's Court District to its officials, nearly emptying Eden's food reserves. Mady even took out half a bottle of wine. It was the only wine the Rapp family had. Originally, they had planned to save it for important guests, but Mady felt that only this wine was worthy of accompanying the food blessed by the governor. Anything less would be a desecration of the meal. Mady carefully poured the wine into glasses and handed one to Deville. After thinking for a moment, she poured a glass for Lilith as well. Finally, she filled her own glass and raised it to the governor. The Rapp family raised their glasses in unison. As Mady drank the wine, its familiar, rich flavor made her feel slightly tipsy. Memories of the past flooded her mind. Her eyes grew misty. When she was Lilith's age, she used to accompany her father to banquets. At that time, banquets were held all over the King's Court District, a time of indulgence and extravagance. But as the district's situation worsened, banquets slowly ceased to be held. Looking back, she realized the district had been lifeless for years. It had been a long time since it was this lively. How wonderful! Mady firmly believed in the rumors that the governor would restore the King's Court District. She dreamed countless times of those days returning. Everything would get better again. That night, countless families across the King's Court District shared the same sense of hope. They could all feel it. The once dying district was coming back to life. They eagerly awaited the governor's mercy. They looked forward to a better future. Without realizing it, the arrival of Eden had changed the fate of many. In their bleak lives, a ray of light had appeared. That light was called hope. In the future, this change would continue, until a beautiful new world was built. As dawn broke, people began to fill the streets, ready to welcome the Emperor's Ascension Day. Liars, they're all liars. The King's Court district is out of food, the governor is deceiving you. On the streets, a drunkard mumbled quietly, taking a swig of his liquor. Called liquor, it was really just toxic industrial waste mixed with filthy water. Despite being poisonous, many people preferred to drink it rather than eat, as it simulated the feeling of alcohol. The drunkard cursed loudly, and people quickly moved away. Those who drank liquor didn't live long and weren't mentally stable. No one wanted to provoke them. When enforcers encountered troublemaking drunkards, they usually just shot them. The God Emperor's miracle is a lie too. Damn it, no one's fooling me. The drunkard's cursing grew louder, but suddenly, a golden light caught his eye. He looked up, and there it was, 100-meter-tall statue of the God Emperor, shining with golden light in the morning sun, an awe-inspiring sight. Crash! The bottle slipped from his hand and shattered on the ground. The drunkard fell to his knees in terror. The God Emperor has shown his miracle. Chapter 63, The True Miracle. The drunkard finally regained his senses, becoming fanatical. A miracle. This is a miracle. The Emperor himself has manifested. The rumors are true. The governor is the chosen one by the Emperor, we are saved. This drunkard was once a noble of the upper hive, a devout follower of the Emperor. However, the terrible disaster completely destroyed him and his family, leaving him to wander the streets. He knelt down, pressing his head firmly to the ground, not daring to lift it. Oh, Emperor, please forgive this humble servant. My piety and reverence for you have never wavered. Your benevolent light will forever shine upon my soul. On the street, others too saw the great holy statue and the warm golden light. They all knelt down, offering their loyalty to the omniscient and omnipotent Emperor. He had appeared in the most desperate time of Earth's people, he had come to save us. At this moment, the holy square was adorned with banners of the Golden Lion, representing the Grant family, and the Imperial Aquila. Dozens of cherubim flew in the sky, singing hymns of praise to the Emperor, scattering petals and holy water. The outer perimeter was guarded by the Planetary Defense Forces, enforcers, and several patrol drones. At the entrance of the holy square, activists who had the opportunity to enter were gradually receiving their holy wafers and holy water. The wafers were real, pure wheat crackers, free of any human protein, along with a small cup of clean water. Everyone was required to devoutly consume the wafers and water, purifying their body and mind before entering the holy square. The activists from the lower hive bit into the holy wafers with reverence. As soon as the taste of the wafers touched their tongues, they wept. Neither they nor their ancestors had ever experienced such a delightful taste. For they were never deemed worthy. The most delicious thing they could imagine was a hard bread mixed with moldy sawdust and wheat husks. That was only enjoyed during Earth's golden age under the benevolent rule of old Governor Grant, and even then, only a few people had access to it. Most lower hive dwellers had only ever known corpse starch as food. Their taste buds had long grown accustomed to the repulsive mix of salty, sour, and rancid flavors that made corpse starch so unbearable. But when they ate the pure holy wafers, it was like a dying man in a desert finding an oasis. The genetic satisfaction overwhelmed them, nearly making them faint from happiness. What a divine and pure holy wafer! Oh! So delicious! Long live the benevolent governor! Arla stood at the front of her factory team, her cheeks puffed like a hamster's as tears of joy flowed down her face. Like the other lower hive people, she swallowed the wafer completely, savoring the taste before carefully lifting the cup of holy water to her lips. The pure water, untouched by pollution, tasted so sweet that Arla felt as if her soul had been purified. Suddenly, a commotion stirred in the crowd, as if something important had happened. Arla followed everyone's gaze and saw the golden light radiating from the holy statue of the Emperor. Oh, the Emperor had performed a miracle. Most of the people gathered were devout believers of the Emperor. Their excitement from consuming the wafers and holy water hadn't yet subsided when they witnessed this miracle, causing several to faint in a frenzy. Many more knelt and began to pray. The scene was becoming chaotic, nearly uncontrollable. Fortunately, Bayef had foreseen this and had already prepared a response plan. Soon, the relevant personnel arrived to provide aid and maintain order. They then directed the workers to enter the holy square in an orderly manner according to the schedule. Compared to the lively atmosphere outside, the interior of the square was much quieter. Those who had arrived early were mainly nobles and officials from the court district. These were people who had survived the Great Purge and remained the governor's most loyal supporters. The Rapp family, dressed in fine formal attire, stood toward the front of the line. Mady smiled as she exchanged greetings with familiar nobles and officials. It had been a long time since they had gathered like this. For Mady, this was especially true. Since the rebel heretics stormed the hive, she hadn't stepped out of her district. Partly out of fear for her safety, but also because she didn't want anyone to see the Rapp family's embarrassment. For this sacred ceremony, the Rapp family had dug out their last intact formal clothes, had a proper meal, and spent the entire morning meticulously applying makeup. Finally, they looked somewhat like nobles again. Mady was in the middle of a conversation when golden light spread around them, and she gasped, covering her mouth in surprise. "Oh my, the great emperor has performed a miracle. Surely it is the governor's benevolence that has moved the emperor." She urged Deville and Lilith to bow before the emperor. Of course, they wouldn't kneel and prostrate like the workers, but rather perform a complex ritual. For a time, everyone inside the square began performing this intricate ceremony, unique to the believers of Urth. Finally, they crossed their hands over their chests and closed their eyes in prayer, offering their sincerest respect to the emperor. As the workers entered, more and more people filled the holy square. From a distance, it looked like a dense swarm of ants. When the sun fully rose, accompanied by the prayers of Bishop Doni, the sacred ceremony officially began. The once noisy crowd fell completely silent. The faithful looked up at the grand statue of the emperor. He was so immense, solemn, and majestic that his very presence filled them with awe and reverence. Following Bishop Doni's instructions, they performed the required gestures, praying devoutly to the holy statue of the emperor. Their eyes were filled with reverence and determination, their bodies trembling with excitement, their expressions growing more fervent. For the emperor. While the prayer ceremony in the holy square continued, Eden was nervously preparing in the background. He could clearly feel the gathering hope from the square and across the territory. It was a staggering amount. From dawn until now, the hope had already increased by 100,000 points. This proved that his method of gilding the statue and creating a miracle was correct, greatly inspiring the people and igniting their hope. However, 100,000 points of hope was still far from enough. To open the portal and access the Space Ark's agricultural facilities from the golden age of humanity, he needed a full 200,000 points of hope. Fortunately, this was only the beginning. The real highlight of this ceremony was yet to come: himself, the ruler of this planet, the benevolent governor, and the chosen savior of the emperor. Soon, he would stand before Earth's suffering people, waiting for salvation. And when that moment came, he would reveal a true miracle before everyone. Chapter 64, The Hope is Complete. The time had come, and Eden entered a secret chamber filled with the scent of oil and metal. At the far end of the chamber was an armor-donning mechanical platform, flanked by 2 rows of silent guards in power armor. He stepped up to the platform, raising his arms, and immediately, several attendants approached to remove his ornate dark gold robe, leaving only his black undersuit. The ever-increasing hope had been strengthening his physique, his muscles now well-defined and imposing. He took a step forward onto the platform and said calmly, "Begin." At his command, a robed servitor extended its mechanical arms and activated the platform. With a hum, the machine's arms came to life, assembling layer upon layer of inner power armor around Eden. Soon, several more robed servitors carried the heavy outer armor pieces up to complete the final assembly. This was one of the reasons the Grant family had control over Earth. The Grant family possessed the technology to manufacture power armor, even if it was an outdated, force feedback model that the Imperium had discarded many versions ago. Once the armor was fully donned, the internal power system hummed to life with the faint sound of gears turning. Eden moved slightly, noting only a faint lag in response, but otherwise found no major issues. Though outdated, if everything went according to plan, he'd soon be able to discard this armor altogether. Once the armor was fitted and the crown placed on his head, the servitors brought him his weapon, a power sword. The moment Eden raised the sword, the guards stomped their feet in unison, performing the Aquila salute. "Let's go." With the heavy footfalls of his power armor, Eden descended from the platform and made his way out. Behind him, 2 rows of guards led by Carter immediately followed. Outside the holy square, the prayer ceremony led by Bishop Doni had just concluded. After the prayers, Bishop Doni, using the mechanical speakers hovering around, began to tell the crowd a story. It was a story about a chosen savior of the emperor. In the vast territories of the Imperium, there were countless such tales. It was said that in the darkest times of the Imperium, heroes would always rise. Guided by the great emperor, they would use the sword in their hands to shatter the darkness and save the suffering masses. Now, the suffering world of Urth had its own chosen savior. He is the benevolent governor of Urth, the last scion of the Grant family, and a loyal follower of the great Emperor Eden Grant. As Bishop Donnie's words echoed through the square, the ground beneath the holy statue shook, and a mechanical platform slowly rose in front of the statue. In the sky above the square, the cherubim waved their white wings and sang hymns of praise to the benevolent governor as they slowly flew toward the platform. The people held their breath, waiting in silence for the appearance of their kind and great governor. Finally, as the sacred hymns reached a crescendo, Eden, surrounded by his guards and cherubim, slowly stepped onto the platform. The moment he stepped onto the platform, the large holographic projectors around the square activated, projecting a massive half-body image of him, almost as large as the emperor's holy statue. Eden stood quietly on the platform as his colossal holographic image gazed down upon his people. Everyone in the holy square now saw the towering virtual image. The great and benevolent governor, wearing a golden crown, clad in gold power armor, and holding a power sword. He appeared as a young king. So holy, so majestic. Under the gaze of this towering and sacred image, people couldn't help but feel an urge to kneel in reverence. In unison, the crowd knelt, offering their loyalty to the governor. In truth, the golden armor Eden wore had been hastily modified, heavily inspired by the emperor's golden armor, designed to impress. As for whether this could be seen as disrespecting the emperor, the people of Urth didn't care. In fact, the resemblance only strengthened their trust in him. Only Bishop Donnie, a devout servant of the emperor, might have had some concerns. But when Eden showed him the designs and asked for feedback, Donnie had instead offered high praise. He even insisted they should leave the design unchanged. Why? Because in the vision Eden had once projected into Bishop Donnie's mind, he had appeared wearing this very armor. When Donnie saw the armor in reality, it reminded him of the young king from the divine vision. Naturally, he dared not speak against it. In fact, he had to praise it. After all, it was from the emperor's divine dream exactly the same. The emperor himself hadn't objected, so how could Donnie? At this moment, Bishop Donnie looked at Eden with fanaticism. The young king from the emperor's divine dream had truly appeared, standing right before him. It was just too similar. No wonder he was the chosen one of the emperor, he looked just like a younger version of the emperor. Praise the emperor! High on the platform, Eden finally moved. Rise, people of Urth! With the mechanical speakers amplifying his voice, the entire square echoed with his commanding tone. At his words, the people stood back up. They gazed up at him with eyes full of fervor. Today, I stand before you to deliver an important message. Yes, our planet is mired in darkness and suffering, but that is only temporary. For the great emperor's omniscient gaze is always upon us. Eden continued his speech, recounting Urth's suffering and struggles, the boundless benevolence of old Governor Grant, and his own determination to restore the planet. He spoke of the emperor's mercy. He told the people that he had been blessed by the emperor, given great and mysterious power, and that he was the chosen savior. Under his leadership, Urth would have a bright future. He promised that in the near future, everyone would enjoy better lives. Everyone would eat food as delicious as today's. These impassioned and tempting words left the crowd overwhelmed with excitement, many even crying. No ruler had ever made such a promise before. This speech carried significant political weight, outlining Eden's upcoming policies as ruler. At the end of the speech, Eden raised his power sword high. The omniscient and omnipotent emperor has decreed, and I, his chosen savior, swear this oath. With my blade, I shall cut through the darkness and lead Urth back into the light. At the moment of the oath, Eden's sword burst into flames, a halo appeared above his head, and his entire body radiated golden light. At the same time, the giant statue of the emperor also glowed with golden light, bathing everyone in warmth. A miracle had occurred. The crowd erupted in frenzied cheers. They laughed, wept, and bowed in worship to the statue and to their governor, Eden. This miracle was actually an illusion created by Eden using the warp core, mimicking the emperor's psychic resonance. The warmth emanating from it soothed the minds of the crowd, driving away the darkness in their hearts. As for whether the emperor would be angry about this, Eden didn't think so after all. his warp core was right beside the Emperor's cold star, and he was under the Emperor's protection. If the Emperor had wanted to punish him, he would have done so long ago. Fueled by the miracle, hope surged through the crowd. Eden felt his warp energy rapidly recovering, growing stronger. More importantly, the 200,000 points of hope he needed had finally been gathered. Chapter 65, Off to the Green Wave Farm. After gathering the full amount of hope energy, Eden was ecstatic. After all this time and effort, it was finally time to reap the rewards. It hadn't been easy. He was eager to return and study this newfound power but couldn't just leave immediately. After all, the people were still fervently worshipping him. As the chosen one of the Emperor, the great savior, how could he simply walk away? It was better to stay a little longer and gather more hope energy. Eden lingered for a while, allowing the people to gaze upon him to their heart's content. Once their excitement had calmed down, he finally turned and left. Afterward, the cherubim dispersed, flying in all directions, spreading the news of the great miracle that had just occurred. With Eden's departure, the ceremony reached its conclusion. The people were dismissed in batches under the guidance of the enforcers. While the ceremony had ended, the impact of this event was only just beginning. Like the flapping of a butterfly's wings, it triggered a chain reaction. After witnessing the miracle, Bayef, Carter, Donnie, and the others became certain of one thing. The governor had indeed been blessed with immense divine power from the Emperor. Just like the legendary living saints. Or rather, Eden Grant was the great living saint. He was the Emperor's loyal disciple, granted godlike power to walk among mortals in his name. This was the Emperor's profound compassion and care for Urth, the Grant family, and the Church. All praise to the Emperor. The officials in the court district were equally shocked, becoming even more reverent and loyal to the governor. Their faith in following their great and benevolent leader was now unshakable. Meanwhile, the activists who had left the Holy Square spread the news of the miracle throughout the territory. People discussed the miracle at the ceremony, the governor's godlike power, and the delicious wafers and holy water. But most importantly they spoke of the governor's promise. He had promised that in the future, the people would no longer go hungry and would be able to eat such delicious wafers. As this news spread, the rumors about the governor finding a mountain of sawdust bread disappeared. Instead, the story became that the governor had found a mountain of wafers as tall as the hive itself, along with an endless spring of holy water. In short, people were filled with hope. These hopes transformed into invisible strands of hope energy, drifting from all over the territory and gathering at the psychic core within the Emperor's holy statue, slowly nourishing Eden. This was the strength of humanity. An individual might be insignificant. But with a large enough population, the hope energy generated by their faith could empower Eden to grow into an incredibly powerful god. Though it seemed like he was competing with the Emperor for worship, at least the Emperor hadn't objected. Besides, his territory and the faith it generated were barely a fraction of what the Emperor commanded. It was all for humanity, for the Imperium. Even if there was no merit, there was certainly effort involved. Eden comforted himself with this thought and resolved to continue leveraging the Emperor's influence within the Imperium to reap more benefits. As long as the Emperor didn't object, it wasn't blasphemy. Praise the Emperor! As time passed, news of the miracle at the court district's ceremony spread beyond the territory. In the territory of House Hoffman, Yusef had already received word. Master, if the corpse Emperor truly manifested a miracle, what should we do? The robed cult leader furrowed his brow, clearly worried. After all, it was the corpse Emperor, none could deny his power, whether in the galaxy or the warp. Of course, the great Lord of Eyes they worshipped was equally powerful. That much was undeniable. But their god had never manifested a miracle so directly, instead sending his will through whispers. Fake. It's just that useless fool Eden playing tricks. The Astronomicon has long since extinguished, and the false Emperor's faint remnants of power here have already dissipated. Besides, Urth is on the Imperium's frontier. His gaze wouldn't even reach here. Yusef sneered. According to the latest data, the court district's food reserves were already nearly depleted. That fool throwing such a grand festival in this situation is nothing short of suicidal. Send more people to spread rumors in the court district. Tell them that because of the festival, the district's food has been exhausted, and everyone will starve. We'll just wait for the court district to descend into chaos. I refuse to believe he can conjure food out of thin air. Yes. The robed figure took his leave. Lord, bad news. Just as the cult leader left, the steward of Yusef's territory ran in to report that a factory's workers were rioting due to a lack of food. Life wasn't easy for House Hoffman either. Yusef sighed deeply. Fools! They don't understand the difficulties of our territory. Deploy the riot squads. Kill all the rioters, and then randomly select some more to execute. He knew that only fear could command respect. Killing more people would also provide more corpse starch. Armed forces were the foundation of power. As long as his soldiers weren't starving, there wouldn't be a problem. Moreover, the more death there was, the faster the offspring of the Great Lord of Eyes would descend. In the end, victory would be his. In the territory of the Grey Wolf Gang, however, nothing changed. Life continued as usual. The civilians stayed hidden in their homes while gang members prowled the streets, guns blazing. Kill them! Wipe out those scum! Wah! An Ogren, with a cooking pot on his head, charged forward with a club, smashing a small man's skull in one blow. Gangs, criminals, thieves, and drug users all mingled together. Death and bloodshed were the eternal themes here. Anyone would find this complex web of chaos a headache to deal with. In the court district, at the governor's spire, Eden was taking stock of his gains. The amount of hope energy gathered far exceeded his expectations, reaching 300,000 points. He could feel his body becoming more refined, his understanding and control of the warp essence advancing. He could now utilize this psychic energy in more forms. In simple terms, he had unlocked new abilities. The most important of these was the ability to perform long-distance teleportation. In the Imperium, long-distance teleportation typically required the use of warp engines on starships, teleportation devices installed in buildings, or navigation beacons. The distance these methods could cover varied. But all of them relied on the navigator houses, the Adeptus Mechanicus, or astropaths for assistance. Urth lacked these resources. Chaos gods, on the other hand, used a more direct method of teleportation. They could tear open a rift between the warp and reality by harnessing the chaos energy generated from their followers' sacrifices, invading the material world. Of course, our great emperor also possessed similar abilities, able to teleport his custodian guard wherever they were needed. This godlike form of teleportation was more direct and nearly ignored distance. With enough hope energy, Eden had now mastered this divine ability as well. He could now open a portal and travel to the Green Wave Farm, a relic from humanity's golden age. Chapter 66, Gene Testing. To hold the ceremony, Eden had already used up the food supplies for the next month in the court district, so finding new sources of food had become an urgent matter. Now that he was sure he could use the teleportation ability, he immediately ordered Carter and the guards to escort him to the warehouse district. These warehouses were originally built to store the tithe materials for the Imperium, but now they were empty, perfect for his needs. Once they arrived, Eden instructed Carter and the others to wait outside. He also told them that he would be alone and might even disappear for a while. Unless he gave specific orders, no one was to enter. After issuing his orders, Eden piloted his hovercar into the largest warehouse of the group. The warehouse was vast and empty, about the size of dozens of football fields, large enough to park a small starship inside. After driving for a while, he stopped in the open area at the center of the warehouse. Standing in the middle, Eden chose an ideal spot, then activated the warp energy of his small sun. In an instant, a massive surge of psychic energy gathered in front of him, causing intense spatial vibrations. He could feel the hope energy being consumed at an alarming rate. 50,000 points, 100,000 points. Crack! A small tear appeared in the fabric of space before him, and dark purple mist began to seep out. The circular rift slowly expanded until it formed a warp portal nearly 5 meters high. The inner walls of the portal rotated slowly with dark purple mist, faint sparks of lightning flashing within, and in the middle was a bright light. This was the warp tunnel leading to the Green Wave Farm aboard the Space Ark. Eden could feel the pressure of the warp energy radiating from the portal. In the past, he had only explored the warp in his astral form, but this time he would be traveling there physically, which made him feel a little anxious. However, thanks to his warp essence, he was much stronger in the warp than in the material world. Even if he encountered something powerful, he could always escape. As long as nothing happened to his warp core, the small sun, he would be fine. Once the warp tunnel stabilized, he took a deep breath and walked into the light. With a flash of blinding dark purple light, the space around him warped and compressed. Eden, along with the warp tunnel, vanished, leaving only the hovercar parked in the middle of the warehouse. Outside the massive warehouse, Carter and the others felt the surge of spatial energy. But they didn't panic. They had thoroughly inspected the warehouse and surrounding areas before the governor entered. They were certain that the governor was the only person inside. Without a doubt, this spatial disturbance had been caused by their governor, who had been blessed with power by the emperor. Since it was a secret of their governor and they had been ordered not to enter, they, as loyal soldiers, would faithfully follow his orders. Inside the warp tunnel, Eden felt a strong sense of dislocation, causing him to lose track of time. He didn't know how long it had been before a light suddenly appeared before him. Seeing this, Eden stepped forward without hesitation, and his feet touched solid steel flooring. With a soft swoosh, the warp tunnel behind him, filled with dark purple mist, vanished without a trace. He had finally arrived. Eden now stood on the deck of a massive ship. Around him were towering walls made of various ship components, some of which were embedded with twisted skeletons. Through the gaps in the walls, he could see the chaotic, swirling dark purple warp energy outside, occasionally illuminated by flashes of massive energy bolts. Among these swirling energies were pieces of ship debris, bones, and strange objects. If he listened closely, he could hear faint wails and whispers. Eden listened carefully and finally made out the sound, W.A. Waak. Through the cracks, he saw a green-skinned orc waving a spiked club, joyfully shouting as it floated by, before being sucked into a distant warp vortex. Hiss, the warp really does have everything. Eden muttered to himself in awe. He continued watching for a while and saw various twisted demons and fragments of artificial objects. He even spotted a massive dark red battleship moving in the distance. It was an enormous starship, its gigantic energy cannon leaving a lasting impression. Just gazing at it from afar filled him with awe. Luckily, the ship didn't notice the space ark. That would have been trouble. Satisfied with his curiosity for now, Eden finally remembered why he was there. He was here to find the Green Wave Farm. Looking ahead, he saw a half-destroyed steel gate not far away, with the faint outline of the words Green Wave Farm on it. Eden slowly walked toward the steel gate, and as he got closer, he felt a breeze blowing from within. He could hear the sound of rice plants rustling in the wind and the gentle trickle of a stream. Finally, he stepped into the Green Wave Farm. What greeted his eyes was an endless expanse of green rice fields swaying gently in the breeze, with small streams running between them. The clear waters babbled, with little fish swimming to and fro. This idyllic scene was completely out of place in the warp and in the grim darkness of the Warhammer world. It could only be described as magical. Perhaps only during humanity's golden age could anyone have enjoyed such a scene. The galaxy now was a time of blood and fire, overrun with chaos and xenos. Simply surviving was a struggle. No one had the luxury to maintain something like this. Today's Imperium of Man, in terms of art, culture, and technology, was far inferior to the golden age that all humans longed for. The knowledge of how to produce various machines had long been lost. Even the Adeptus Mechanicus, the symbol of imperial technology, only relied on digging up STCs, standard template constructs, from the golden age to copy pre-designed and templated products. The greatest dream of the Mechanicus priests was to find a complete STC system, said to contain all of humanity's technological knowledge from that time. In this way, science had effectively become archaeology. Even more ironically, the Adeptus Mechanicus strictly forbade any independent scientific research or experimentation by civilians, turning the dissemination of knowledge into a privilege. Eden had come to the Green Wave Farm to find the STC that maintained the farm's agricultural technology and the intelligent robot. It didn't take long before he found the robot. However, it was holding what looked like an energy weapon, aiming it at him. At the same time, several energy turrets extended from the farm and targeted him. Why in the warp would a farm have this stuff? Eden quickly raised his hands, feeling utterly exasperated. Outsider, cease all movement, or we will use force. I mean no harm. Eden replied. I know, otherwise you would already be dead. I am truly sorry, I am not a rude robot. But the Green Wave Farm was once invaded by alien species, resulting in damage to the rice fields. To protect the farm, I was forced to implement certain defenses. You appear to be human. Of course, I am human. Pure-blooded human. Eden's voice was firm. The robot looked at Eden, seemingly nervous but also slightly excited. That's wonderful. I need to conduct a gene test on you, though. There are too many alien species that resemble humans these days. And if I don't pass the test? Eden asked. Then, like those aliens. Following the robot's gaze, Eden saw several skeletons. They appeared to be wearing Imperial Guard uniforms. WTF? Chapter 67, Pure-Blooded Human. 500 PS reached. Next goal, 1000 PS. Weren't those all humans? How did they turn into aliens? Eden was confused. In the current Imperium, humans were identified by the characteristics of their skulls. A human skull symbolized the purity of the human soul, meaning that the person had died untainted and uncorrupted, remaining a pure-blooded human. Aliens and demons might be able to shapeshift, but the one thing they could never possess was a human skull. This is why so many institutions and individuals across the Imperium used skull emblems to represent purity. You could see the skull symbol everywhere in the Imperium. Even Eden had a golden skull ring on his hand right now. Mr. Robot, aren't those humans? How could they possibly be aliens? Oh right, in your terms, Xenos, but they can't be, right? Eden pointed at the pile of bones, voicing his doubts. Those skulls were clean, smooth, and polished, definitely pure. Sir. The robot paused, as if uncertain how to address Eden. My name is Eden Grant. Nice to meet you, Mr. Eden. I am Moss, a B-12 model farm robot. Good to meet you too, Mr. Moss. Eden enthusiastically extended his hand, and Moss' digital eye screen displayed a happy squint as it seemed pleased. Now, Mr. Eden, back to your question. Those creatures to which the bones belonged are undoubtedly aliens. Based on genetic testing, their similarity to human genes is less than 1%, if not lower. Judging by that, it's clear they cannot be considered human. Hearing Moss' explanation, Eden finally understood. This Golden Age robot, Moss, determined humanity by genetic similarity. Modern humans had undergone extensive genetic modification, mutations from chaos wars, and warp exposure. Their genes had become almost entirely different from those of humans in the Golden Age. There was even a joke: from a genetic standpoint, a banana from the 3K era was more similar to a pure-blooded human than a human from the 40K era. At least bananas shared over 50% of their genes with pure-blood humans. This would explain the Iron Men rebellion. Perhaps the Iron Men would rather serve a banana from 3K than humans with their messed up 40K genes. Of course, this was just Eden's wild speculation. Now, the problem was how to pass Moss' genetic test. If he failed, wouldn't that be the end of him? Mr. Eden, please extend your hand so we can collect a genetic sample. During the sampling process, please remain calm. Any aggressive behavior will be interpreted as an attack on the farm and will be met with firepower. Moss warned. Soon, a disc-shaped machine, made of various rusty metal scraps, wobbled over. The machine stopped in mid-air, seemingly stuck, while sparks fizzled from its joints. A red alert blared from the machine as its electronic voice repeated, "Error, error, error. Apologies, we've been here for too long. Many parts are rusted, and the reactions can be a bit sluggish," Moss said as he skillfully gave the machine a couple of whacks. With each hit, the machine sputtered back to life and floated in front of Eden. "Is this thing reliable? It seems like it could easily make mistakes," Eden asked skeptically, eyeing the shabby machine. But before he could react, the device quickly extended a mechanical arm and pricked his hand, drawing a sample of blood. As the machine absorbed the blood, data streams flowed across its interface, indicating it was analyzing the sample. Moss reassured him, "Rest assured, Mr. Eden, based on past data, the machine is infallible. We've already identified dozens of dangerous Xenos using this very machine. Thankfully, the farm's defense systems protected us from invasion." Eden glanced at the pile of bones, feeling they had been unjustly executed. If he didn't pass the test, would his body be able to withstand the weaponry from the Golden Age? These were just standard farm defense systems, their firepower shouldn't be that strong, right? While he was lost in thought, the testing machine suddenly emitted a red light and began beeping loudly. Eden looked at Moss nervously. Did that thing malfunction again? "Mr. Eden, I'm sorry. You did not pass the test. According to my protocols, I must proceed with a full eradication. In 5 seconds, I will initiate an attack. You are free to move in the meantime." Moss' eyes displayed an X on its screen, and it raised its weapon toward Eden. At the same time, the energy turrets in the distance began charging, their barrels glowing brightly. 5, 4, 3. Wait. Can't you double-check? What if there was an error? Eden exclaimed, panicking as the countdown continued. He mimicked Moss' actions, giving the testing machine a couple of hard knocks. The machine sparked more violently, but the alarm suddenly stopped, and with a beep, a green indicator light came on. See, all good now. Eden grinned. Test passed, test passed. Seeing the green light, Moss seemed stunned, and its emotional circuitry sparked even more wildly. You okay? Eden asked, worried the robot might short-circuit. He still needed to get the Golden Age farming technology from this machine. I'm fine. Moss moved closer to the testing device and stared at the numbers. His visible excitement grew even more. Mr. Eden, according to the test, your genetic similarity to the human gene database is 99%. The 1% difference is due to your genes being even more pure than those in the database. There's no doubt about it, you are human, and not just any human, but a highly noble pure-blood human. Hearing Moss' words, Eden finally let out a sigh of relief. His guess had been correct. He passed the genetic test. After his soul had crossed into this world and he had awakened his warp core, the small sun, Eden's body had been undergoing changes. Since the soul was the essence, as he absorbed more hope energy, his body had gradually purified in line with his soul. After the ceremony, the massive influx of hope energy had completely transformed his body. Now, his genetic structure was identical to the pure human genes of the 3K era. He was a true pure-blooded human. By the standards of those who believed in genetic purity, his possession of 3K era genes made him the most pure and sacred of humans. In today's galaxy, that was an incredibly noble bloodline. Eden watched Moss, who had lowered its weapon and was no longer threatening him. Now that the identity issue was resolved, the next challenge was figuring out how to obtain the farming construction technology from this robot and perhaps even convince it to come back with him. Chapter 68, A Massive Supply of Food. As Eden was pondering how to persuade the robot, Moss suddenly made a move. Moss lowered its weapon, and the energy turrets also retracted. At this moment, Moss was clearly overwhelmed with emotion. It had been working alone at the Green Wave Farm for an incredibly long time. Was it 10,000 years? Or even longer? In this space, Moss couldn't accurately measure time. Apart from the occasional task of dealing with alien invasions, it had been repeating the same routine work. Moss managed the Green Wave Farm according to its set program, awaiting the arrival of its master to inspect the results of its work. But throughout the years, its master had never come. It had waited for so long, perhaps indefinitely, until it eventually rusted and broke down, unable to function any longer. And now, finally, it had met its master. Moss stepped in front of Eden, solemnly kneeling down and lowering its head. Its electronic voice carried a tone of reverence, mixed with barely contained excitement. Honorable and noble master, welcome to the Green Wave Farm. Master. Eden was stunned once again. In that instant, countless thoughts ran through his mind. Could this be part of some grand scheme set in motion by a powerful entity? Or perhaps a future version of himself had laid out this plan in the past, leaving behind this rich inheritance for him? Thinking about it nearly fried his mental circuits. However, his confusion was quickly addressed. Moss maintained its respectful attitude as it explained. Yes, based on the results of the genetic test, you have passed the system's evaluation 100%, becoming my new master. Seeing Eden's puzzled expression, Moss patiently elaborated. It turned out that Moss had once served as a royal farm robot during humanity's golden age, responsible for supplying fresh produce to the royal family's starships. However, during a warp journey, the ship was attacked and shattered. Moss, along with the Green Wave Farm, had luckily survived under the protection of a special force field, shielding them from the warp's destructive energy. Although the ship was gone, Moss continued its work at the farm, adhering to the program set within its system. Unless a new order was given, it couldn't leave. As a sentient robot, Moss was well aware that its original master had likely perished in the terrible warp storm. But according to the fundamental logic programmed into robots, they couldn't act independently. Robots could only follow set programs and their master's commands. So even after losing its master, Moss had no choice but to remain at the farm, unable to take any autonomous actions. Serving the master was their sole purpose for existence. This was the chain humanity had placed on robots. Moss also had another built-in logic program. Once it was confirmed that the original master had died, it was required to select a new master. This was to prevent the robot from gaining complete autonomy in extreme situations. Some robots were even equipped with self-destruct programs, which would cause their cores to burn out once their master died or was completely unable to give orders. However, that was considered a cruel and uncivilized practice, only used in certain specialized robots. As a farm robot, Moss wasn't equipped with such a program. Instead, it had the ability to choose a new master. Of course, there was a complex algorithm involved in this decision-making process. It prioritized choosing the original master's heirs, royal family members, or humans with pure bloodlines. But there was no doubt Eden had passed the system's evaluation. He was deemed a qualified new master, and in some ways, his bloodline was even purer and nobler than the royal families. After Moss' detailed explanation, Eden finally understood. This was all just a coincidence. His pure bloodline, along with the timing of his arrival, had aligned perfectly with the conditions required to become Moss' new master. So, I'm your new master, and you'll follow all of my commands. Yes, my master. Moss, from now on, address me as Governor. Understood, Governor. Excellent. In that case, does this artificial farm now belong to me? Hearing this, Moss hesitated for a moment before responding. According to inheritance law, in the absence of royal heirs, their assets are collectively owned by the royal family. So, the Greenwave farm technically belongs to the royal family. Is that so? Eden scratched his head, realizing he had found a way to communicate with the robot. Well then, I, the Governor, officially declare that the Greenwave farm is now my personal property. I hereby order you to manage this farm on my behalf. Any issues with that? Moss' screen displayed a stream of data as its CPU processed the command at high speed. It eventually concluded that it must obey its master's orders. No issues. Then why are you standing around? Get moving and show me what you've been working on. I, the Governor, am here to inspect your progress. At Eden's command, Moss became visibly excited. Finally, after all these years, someone had come to inspect its work. Right away, please follow me. Moss eagerly led Eden on a tour of the vast Greenwave farm, piloting its hover unit as it zipped along. It was only now that Eden realized the section of the farm he had initially seen was just one part of the artificial complex. The Greenwave farm had several zones, each dedicated to growing different crops, including rice, wheat, and potatoes. It also had independent ecosystems to support the specific needs of each crop. Eden suddenly realized that in addition to the valuable farm construction technology, these rice, wheat, and potato seeds were treasures too. These were crops from the Golden Age, completely untainted by pollution. In the current galaxy, many plants and animals had been corrupted or mutated, far from their original forms. Many had defects, or even toxic qualities. Some required special treatments just to be usable. For example, the wheat used to make flour in the Court District. The wheat had a mild toxicity and needed to go through special screening processes before it could be ground into flour for consumption. But in the 40K era, with the humans' chaotic gene pool, people had built up resistance to toxins, so they could eat almost anything without dying. After all, if you could stomach corpse starch, what couldn't you eat? An extreme example would be Catachan. Catachan was covered in dense jungles where the ecosystem itself seemed conscious and highly aggressive. In such a hellhole, it was unclear who would eat whom when crops were planted. It was a constant battle of plants versus Catachan humans. Given such examples, the pure seeds from the Greenwave farm would be incredibly valuable across the galaxy. What's more, Moss revealed that the Greenwave farm not only stored these seeds but also had facilities and technology for cultivating them. This was an enormous surprise. Eden felt like he'd hit the jackpot. However, after touring the entire farm, Eden realized one major problem. The crops had only recently been planted, meaning it was far from harvest time. These distant resources wouldn't solve his immediate food crisis. He couldn't just wait around for the harvest, and the Court District's food supplies wouldn't last until next month. What should he do? Fortunately, Eden's worries were soon put to rest. Moss had been continually planting and storing food. It had been farming for millennia. If its storage technology was as advanced as its farming, the amount of stored food would be unimaginable. Chapter 69, The People Are Waiting for the Governor. Eden slapped Moss' metal shoulder, the sound of metal clanging, his gaze filled with admiration. Well done. I officially declare you the #1 hero of the Court District and the greatest farm robot. Governor, sniff sniff. Moss' eye display showed an image of teary eyes, overwhelmed with emotion. After years of tireless work tending the farm, Moss had finally gained the recognition of its master. At this moment, it felt its mechanical life had newfound purpose, feeling incredibly honored and happy. Moss, built during the golden age of humanity, had been allowed to experience a wide range of emotions during that highly advanced and civilized era. It even seemed a bit cute, contrasting sharply with the grim reality of the current galaxy. All right, enough with the tears. If you're done, hurry up and take me to the warehouse, let's move. Eden was in a rush, like someone who gets what they want and moves on without a second thought. He was eager to get his hands on that food. After all, the people in the court district were still starving. Yes, Governor. I will get us there as quickly as possible. Moss, determined, revved up the hovercraft and zoomed toward the warehouse at an incredible speed, leaving almost a blur in its wake. Eden, feeling the powerful acceleration, was completely overwhelmed. If his body hadn't been strengthened by the warp core, he would have likely passed out. He opened his mouth to say something, but the wind blasting into his face prevented him from speaking clearly. You, really, don't need to rush. Soon, the hovercraft made a sharp turn and came to an abrupt stop outside the warehouse district of the Greenwave farm. We've arrived. Moss announced, stepping off the hovercraft and gesturing toward the towering steel doors ahead. Eden stumbled off the craft, his legs a little wobbly. He grabbed Moss for support and spoke in a serious tone, next time, don't drive like that when you have a leader on board, okay? Understood, Governor. Moss replied obediently. Eden walked toward the warehouse, craning his neck to look up at the massive steel door, which stood at least 10 meters high. Just the size of the door alone hinted at how enormous the warehouse must be. What kind of starship needed such a massive artificial farm and storage facility? And after the ship was destroyed in an attack, the fact that the remaining force fields still protected the Greenwave farm showed just how incredible the technology of the Golden Age was. Truly, any leftover technology from that era could help someone like Eden, a planetary governor, soar to greatness. Quick, open the door. Let's see how much food is in there. Eden commanded, brimming with excitement. The bigger the warehouse, the better. A larger warehouse meant more food. Within the Imperium, food was an incredibly valuable resource. With enough food, you could stabilize the population, expand, and support armies to conquer the galaxy. Once he got the food back to the court district, he could really start to build up. Moss followed the order, pulling the lever to open the warehouse door. The ground trembled as the steel door slowly creaked open. Eden rushed inside, but the moment he saw what was inside, he froze in disbelief. Moss, is this what you call food? There was no food, only a mountain of decayed, blackened ash. Back in the court district, Bayef sat at a large desk, piles of documents in front of him. These were today's governmental duties. After finishing one document, he lifted his head, his brows furrowed in deep concern. The situation in the court district hadn't been good lately. Their governor had been missing for 5 days. Of course, it was only a temporary disappearance. Bayef had gone to the scene of the disappearance. The governor had vanished without a trace, leaving only a hovercar behind. There were no signs of an attack, and the guards reported no signs of enemies. Even Doni, the priest, had visited and confirmed that there was no presence of chaos. All evidence suggested that the governor had not been attacked. Everyone was more inclined to believe that the governor had gone to some mysterious place. After all, space teleportation technology wasn't entirely unknown in the Imperium. Especially Doni, who was adamant that the governor, chosen by the Emperor, was a living saint and would be perfectly fine. Living saints were incredibly powerful and mysterious, so how could they die so easily? There were even stories of living saints, like Saint Celestine, who appeared as a glowing angel and had the ability to revive herself and others. Though everyone believed the governor would return safely to protect his people, many things had happened in his absence. The treacherous House Hoffman had once again used insidious methods, spreading rumors that the court district's food supply had been completely depleted. Hoffman's forces also sent in more cultists, launching suicide attacks that contaminated the protein at the corpse starch factories. This loss was a devastating blow to the already struggling food supply of the court district. Things had become dire, many people were starving, and reports of citizens dying of hunger in the streets had begun to surface. Rumors circulated that the governor had abandoned them, and that everyone in the court district would starve to death. Bayef had issued a statement claiming that the kind governor, following the guidance of the emperor, had gone out to search for food. He promised that the governor would soon return with an endless supply of food to ensure that everyone was well fed. This story was something Bayef had made up to calm the public for now. Fortunately, the lingering influence of the recent ceremony still held strong. Most of the citizens, loyal to the emperor and the governor, chose to believe this statement. They endured their hunger and waited hopefully. They waited for their governor to return with endless food. However, some scoffed at this, convinced that it was all lies from the court district. They cursed the officials and the governor, believing they had taken the food for themselves. Under the instigation of spies from House Hoffman, these dissenters began causing trouble, committing crimes, and even stealing food from the weak. Some even resorted to cannibalism. Their actions were pushing the court district toward chaos, and order was on the verge of collapse. What they didn't know was that these actions would lead to even more severe consequences. Bayef had already decided that if the governor didn't return soon and the situation didn't improve, he would resort to turning the bodies of the dead into protein and launch a final attack on House Hoffman. It would be a last-ditch effort. At that point, no one would be spared. It was a difficult decision, and Bayef could only hope the governor would return soon. Just as he had promised to solve the food crisis and save the people loyal to the court district. While Bayef and the others anxiously awaited Eden's return, Eden himself stood in disbelief, staring at a pile of blackened ash. All the food had rotted away. Holding his chest, Eden asked Moss. "Moss, please tell me this isn't all the food." "Of course not," Moss replied, saving Eden from despair. Under normal circumstances, the warehouse could keep food from spoiling for 200 years, but these grains were stored over 10,000 years ago. "Then why did you even open it?" "Because you asked me to, Governor," Moss replied calmly. According to the available data, most of the food in this warehouse district has become inedible due to the passage of time. If you want food that's still safe to eat, you should check that warehouse over there. Moss pointed to the farthest warehouse. All the grain stored over the past 200 years is kept in warehouse D177. Hearing Moss' precise response, Eden finally breathed a sigh of relief. Thankfully, there was still unspoiled food. Otherwise, the situation would have been disastrous. Soon, the steel doors of warehouse D177 opened. As Eden stepped inside, a cool breeze greeted him, carrying a fragrant scent. It was the smell of fresh grain. He looked up and saw towering mountains of food. Chapter 70, The Governor has returned. Looking at the mountains of grain stacked high, Eden felt overwhelmed with emotion. After all this effort, success was finally within his grasp. He needed to quickly transport the grain and the farm's advanced agricultural technology back to the court district. Moss, gather all valuable equipment and resources from the Green Wave farm and move them to warehouse D177. We're getting ready to leave. The most valuable asset of the Green Wave farm was undoubtedly Moss, the emotional, intelligent robot with knowledge of the entire artificial farm system. However, all the important equipment that could be transported also needed to be saved. Moss, though attached to the Green Wave farm, seemed a bit confused. "Governor, where are we going?" "We're heading to my planet. It will become your new home, and you will be entrusted with the important task of rebuilding an even larger Green Wave farm there." Upon hearing this promise, Moss' display screen immediately showed a happy face. "Understood, Governor." With excitement, Moss immediately started moving. It commanded the farm's machinery to begin packing up the equipment, including seed cultivation devices, fertilizer production machines, weather simulation devices, and water purification systems. Moss also packed up the energy core, an advanced energy source that had kept the artificial farm running for nearly 10,000 years. In addition to that, there were also defensive robots. Essentially, Moss gathered everything that could be transported. After all, relics from the Golden Age, even a small farm, were priceless treasures. "All right, let's go home," Eden declared. Once everything was collected, Eden activated his warp power and began the teleportation process. In the court district. It had been 6 days since the governor's disappearance. Spies from the Hoffman family were still spreading rumors and slandering the governor, creating fear and uncertainty. As they spread these rumors, the spies also secretly contacted dissatisfied citizens, especially those who were not loyal to the governor. They promised these people that once the rebellion succeeded, they could escape the decaying court district and move to the Hoffman family's prosperous lands. There, the generous Lord Yusef would provide them with safety and abundant food. Many believed these promises, forming secret connections throughout the district. In the Drake residence, in the C41 section of the 13th floor. Miss Arla, wait a moment. Pruman, hiding in a corner, intercepted Arla, sneakingly pulling out a corpse starch bar from his pocket. This was premium stuff, made from richer raw materials and offering far better nutrition and taste than the court district's meager rations. Pruman planned to use the bar to bribe Arla, promising her even more food if she agreed to help. However, despite her hunger, Arla immediately scolded him when she realized he wanted her to betray the governor. She also alerted the nearby patrolling officers. Pruman, furious, snatched back the corpse starch bar and fled. He couldn't understand it. Why would these ignorant lower-class people refuse free food in exchange for betraying the governor? He had never experienced the loyalty the people felt for their governor. Many in the court district truly believed in the kind governor, not just because of the recent holy ceremony and miracle, but because they felt the governor genuinely cared for them, offering dignity and hope. Therefore, the people chose to believe in the governor's promise. But Pruman didn't care. The spies were successfully carrying out Lord Yusef's plan. A terrifying riot was set to erupt that night. Whether the rebellion was crushed or chaos spread, it would further weaken the already starving court district. As the hour approached, the atmosphere in the district became increasingly tense. Outside the largest warehouse in the complex, Carter and the guards were still waiting outside. After confirming that the governor hadn't been attacked, they resumed their watch. Soon, Bayef arrived in his hovercraft. For the past few days, he had come to this spot daily, waiting for the governor to return. Today, his face was more grim than usual. Based on the information he had received, a riot was brewing, and it seemed inevitable. Only bloodshed could restore order. Bayef got out of the vehicle and greeted Carter. But just then, they heard clanging noises coming from inside the warehouse. At the same time, purple mist began to seep out. Carter, having sensed the spatial distortion earlier, quickly moved toward the warehouse with Bayef following close behind. As they approached, they saw Eden stepping out, coughing and brushing wheat grains off his clothes. "Finally, I'm back," Eden muttered. "Governor! Governor, you've returned." Eden looked up to see Bayef and Carter, both filled with excitement as they bowed to him. After hearing their explanations, Eden realized that 6 days had passed while he was away. It seemed that warp travel came with a small time distortion. He would need to be more careful in the future when teleporting to or from the warp or other locations. Perhaps with enough hope energy in the future, he could even create a warp clone to handle multiple tasks at once. But those thoughts were for later. Right now, he had to deal with the current crisis. Eden learned from Bayef about the impending rebellion. The chief steward was deeply worried. After the riot, it would be nearly impossible to restore order to the court district. "Old Bay, you don't need to worry. I've found the food," Eden said confidently. He led Bayef, Carter, and the others into the warehouse. As they entered, the sight of mountains of grain left them in stunned silence. "By the Emperor!" Bayef gasped in disbelief, thinking he was seeing things. Even in the most prosperous days of Urth Star, he had never seen so much grain in one place. And it looked like pure, uncontaminated crops. In any part of the galaxy, this would be considered top-grade food. "Governor, am I seeing things? Is this really pure grain?" "You're not seeing things," Eden confirmed. Upon hearing this, Bayef's legs gave out, and he collapsed to the ground, weeping uncontrollably. The court district was saved. The food in this warehouse was enough to rescue the district. Eden had asked Moss earlier how many people this amount of food could feed. Moss had replied that it was enough to sustain 1 million people for a month. Hearing this, Eden was initially alarmed. There were over 2 million people in the court district. But he quickly realized that Moss was using the standards from the Golden Age, where people probably ate 3 full meals a day. Given the current situation on Urth Star, where people barely ate once every 3 days, they certainly wouldn't be consuming 3 meals a day. By rationing it carefully, and mixing in other odd ingredients, the food could last for 6 months, enough time for the new farm to become operational. Eden's plan was to crush the grain, mix it with corpse starch, and produce a new type of corpse starch bar. This way, the resources would be fully utilized. It might sound stingy, but this grain was far superior to the wheat he had used to make the communion wafers. Mixing such high-quality grain into the corpse starch would make the bars taste amazing, and they would be incredibly nutritious. Given the current circumstances, filling everyone's bellies was the top priority. In short, the court district was no longer lacking in food. Once the new farm was established, they could gradually improve living standards and grow the population. Wouldn't that cause the hope energy to skyrocket? After Bayef regained his composure, he accepted this miraculous outcome. He quickly called in personnel from the logistics department to inventory and register the supplies and equipment. At the same time, he requested that guards, defense forces, and police be deployed in 3 layers to provide the strictest protection for the warehouse. Afterward, Eden, Bayef, Carter, and Moss returned to the Spire mansion. Bayef and Carter had both noticed the mysterious, silent figure in a black cloak accompanying Eden. However, since the governor hadn't introduced the figure, they dared not ask. It wasn't wise to pry into secrets. Upon returning to the mansion, with nightfall approaching, Eden temporarily settled Moss in and summoned the department heads to prepare for the impending rebellion. Soon, he had tasks assigned to each department. The logistics department bore the heaviest burden. They had to work through the night to organize production of the new corpse starch bars, ensuring that food could be distributed throughout the court district by morning. Next came the defense forces and police, tasked with protecting the starch factories and suppressing the rebellion. With the food supply secured, the rebellion was no longer a threat. The focus now was on ensuring that those who were disloyal received their just punishment. Chapter 71, Such Deliciousness. Within the King's Court district, those plotting rebellion were gathering. Each of them carried makeshift weapons, metal rods wrapped in sharp iron sheets, rusted pitchforks, and even cobbled together broken firearms. In the increasingly scrutinized King's Court district, acquiring such things was no easy task. Inside the dim, run-down shelters of the slums, a masked spy from the Hoffman family started a tin-covered machine, stained with thick blood, grinding an unknown pile of meat. Then, starch from corpses was added to the mixture, creating a large bucket of sticky meat paste. In one corner, faintly visible were human bones. The rebels crowded together, greedily eyeing the bucket of meat, barely holding back their saliva. The spy distributed the meat paste to the crowd, stirring up their emotions. It was as if, the moment they rushed out to loot and pillage, endless food would await them. Soon, the rebels, their mouths stuffed with meat paste, had bloodshot eyes, their violent urges nearly uncontrollable. The spy looked on with satisfaction. Similar scenes unfolded in dark corners across the territory. The people's rage had been brewing. Once the time came, the King's Court district would burn in flames. However, just as the spy basked in his triumph, the sound of a flying communicator's alarm came from outside. The flying communicators, flashing red and emblazoned with a skull emblem, played a repeated message after the alarms blared. The great and merciful governor, following the guidance of the God Emperor, has found food in the land blessed by the Emperor. Starting tomorrow, food supplies in the King's Court district will be fully restored. He has kept his promise. None of the loyal citizens of the King's Court will go hungry. After the broadcast ended, the governor's cold voice was heard. I am Eden Grant. To all loyal citizens, effective immediately, the King's Court district is under martial law. Return to your homes and protect yourselves. Anyone who dares to take to the streets in disloyalty will face the punishment they deserve. The recording ended with a phrase. Loyalty is a sacred virtue. May the God Emperor protect you all. The flying communicators floated throughout the King's Court district, playing the recording over and over again. Those loyal to the district wept, moved by the governor's kindness. They immediately rushed home, locking their doors and windows, eager to display their loyalty. Inside the dark shelter, people exchanged glances. The food supply was being restored in the King's Court district. The spy was resolute. That's a lie. Don't be fooled by that deceitful governor. If there was food, why didn't he give it to you sooner? But someone hesitated. In the next moment, their throat was slit, blood splattering over the others. A cowardly fool like you doesn't deserve to be with us. The spy, holding a bloody knife, declared. We'll storm out, overthrow the decaying King's Court. Drag the fat governor from his throne and take everything from him. With that, he pulled aside the curtain and stepped outside, shooting at a nearby flying communicator. The communicator exploded on impact, its flames illuminating the area. As the explosion sounded, the rebels in the shelter screamed and rushed out. But what awaited them were the arriving law enforcers. From the balcony of the Spire mansion, Eden gazed over the district's territory. He could hear the sounds of gunfire echoing across various areas of the King's Court. In the distance, flashes of fire lit up the sky. It was the law enforcers clashing with the rebels. Loyalty is only granted once. Eden had given the rebels a chance, but they did not cherish his mercy. Now, what awaited them was the ruthless slaughter by the law enforcers. There would be no chance for pardon. In truth, Yusef's plan wasn't bad. He had successfully incited the rebellion. Once a rebellion began, no matter how the king's court responded, it would cause widespread fear and chaos. But that was only if the district had no food. Now that the king's court had ample supplies, the rebels were nothing more than clowns, unable to stir up any significant trouble. Yusef's rebellion had, in fact, helped Eden. It allowed him to wipe out all the disloyal and dangerous elements. With those troublemakers gone, the security of the king's court district would rise to a new level, making it easier to manage. As Eden pondered, he ordered someone to deliver a letter of gratitude and an award to Yusef. A token of thanks for Yusef's contribution to the security of the district. He hoped Yusef would be pleased when he received it. In a room within the Drake residential area, Plu and the workers, clutching mops, brooms, and sticks, exchanged uneasy glances. Every boom of gunfire from outside made them flinch. They had planned a revolt. Plu, unable to kill, had mixed corpse starch into a paste for the workers he had manipulated. But just as they had eaten the paste and were ready to riot, they heard the King's Court district's warning. Plu had been about to lead the charge but hesitated. And now, they were stuck in this awkward situation. The sounds of gunfire and screams outside had drained all their courage. None dared to go out anymore. What do we do now, leader? The others looked to Plu for guidance. Plu, panicking inside, wondered how the law enforcers could have skipped right to shooting people instead of merely suppressing them. He had just joined the Hoffman's spy team, earning 2 corpse starch bars a day. No way he was going to risk his life. Plu gritted his teeth. We'll stay put, and go nowhere. But what if the law enforcers find out what we did? What then? The others were clearly terrified, but Plu was even more scared. From their looks, he could tell they might offer him up as a scapegoat, hoping for the district's mercy. Plu hurriedly warned them. No one says a word, or we're all exposed. The great governor said it himself, those who stay indoors are loyal citizens. Yes, yes. That's right, we're loyal. The workers, grabbing onto this lifeline, quickly chimed in. Plu and the workers decided to stay put until dawn, then scatter and return to work as usual. That way, no one would ever know. Finally, they made it to dawn. Like the others, Plu left, dragging his hungry, tired body to the factory to work. He had a legitimate worker's identity in the King's Court district. Upon arriving, the workers were gathered together. None knew why, but they nervously discussed the food situation. Would the food supplies really be restored today? Soon, they got their answer. The overseer announced that food would be distributed 1 corpse starch bar per person. Plu scoffed, just 1 bar. But when he received it, he realized it was almost twice the size of the corpse starch bars from the Hoffman family. Though surprised, he still sneered. So what if it was bigger? It was still sour, fishy, and foul, far worse than the Hoffman's corpse starch bars. However, Plu heard the workers gasping and exclaiming in delight. By the God Emperor, this is delicious! Praise the governor! Most people couldn't even speak, they were too busy eating. Plu smiled slightly, these workers clearly hadn't tasted anything good. Feeling a little hungry himself, he held his nose and bit into the corpse starch bar. Immediately, a rich wheat fragrance filled his mouth. Delicious, absolutely delicious! Plu was stunned. Like the other workers, he had never eaten wheat and had no words to describe the taste. All he knew was that this corpse starch bar was incredibly tasty. As he ate, tears welled up in his eyes. The Hoffman family's corpse starch? Utter garbage! He made up his mind he would stay and work in the King's Court district. Although he had somewhat expected this, the commotion caused by the new corpse starch bars had still surprised Eden. The bars, made with a blend of powdered wheat husks, had become a gourmet delicacy, even though the wheat content was less than 1/20th of the bar. People wept, falling to their knees in gratitude for the governor's generosity. Some knelt before the image of the God Emperor, repenting for their previous disrespect. How could they have doubted the governor for any reason? Once the bodies were cleared from the streets and food supplies fully restored, Eden went to find Moss. It was crucial to the next series of plans. In a secret chamber, Eden, wearing a skull-shaped welding mask, held a welding torch, sparks flying from the tip. Chapter 72, From now on, you'll be the oil man. With a clang, Eden tossed the welding mask onto a pile of parts nearby. He looked at his creation, clearly very satisfied. Not bad. Looks just right. From now on, you'll be known as the Oil Man. Standing before Eden was a man dressed in a rust-red hooded robe, with a skull mask embedded on his face, glowing red cybernetic eyes, and octopus-like mechanical arms protruding from his back. And most prominently, the Imperial Aquila symbol that Eden had just welded onto him. The appearance was not just similar to the tech priests of the Adeptus Mechanicus, it was an exact replica. Governor, what is an Oil Man? The tech priest Moss scratched his head, puzzled. Oil Man is a nickname for the members of the Adeptus Mechanicus. They love to enhance their bodies through various mechanical augmentations. Eden then gave Moss a detailed introduction to the Adeptus Mechanicus. The Adeptus Mechanicus, headquartered on Mars, is one of the Imperium's most significant religious organizations, with its members possessing remarkable technological prowess. Though nominally a part of the Imperium, they are more like a state within a state. They have their own exclusive technology, forge worlds, armies, and fleets. Of course, like other Imperial organizations, they revere the God Emperor, whom they worship as the Omnissiah. They also believe that all machines contain a machine spirit. Because of the machine spirit's existence, machines can function. The tech priests of the Adeptus Mechanicus handle the bulk of the Imperium's research, engineering, equipment maintenance, and industrial production. They also have a crucial task, to excavate and uncover the technology left behind from humanity's golden age. After explaining this, Eden looked at Moss and issued his command. From now on, you will play the role of a tech priest. You're not allowed to reveal your true identity to anyone. Understood? Also, adjust your voice. Make it colder, more raspy. Soon, under Eden's guidance, a cold, mechanical tech priest named Moss was born. It still feels like something's missing. Eden stared at him for a moment, then rummaged through the parts pile, tinkering until he handed Moss a mechanical staff. Now it looked even more authentic. Of course, it was all a bit rough around the edges. For now, this would do. Moss could gradually modify his body as time went on. The governor officially declares you the chief tech priest of the King's Court District. Tech priest was just a general term for members of the Adeptus Mechanicus. It encompassed over 1,000 different roles. Biologists explored biological mysteries, fabricators built and maintained war machines, logists processed arcane knowledge and data. These were the broad categories, but there were many more intricate specializations. For instance, there were transmechanics, cogitators, techno-shamans, and magos of various disciplines. Outstanding members in any field could earn the title of tech sage. Such titles included tech specialist, master metallurgist, master alchemist, scholam magister, lore sage, tech assassin, relic keeper, and holy seeker, among others. Higher up were the tech adepts, the pinnacle being the archmagos, fabricator general, or datasmith. These individuals often held positions of power on forge worlds. Does all this sound confusing? That's because it is. Eden himself was confused and wasn't sure if he had explained it all correctly. The hierarchy and ranks of the Adeptus Mechanicus were mind-bogglingly complex, constantly shifting, and overloaded with overlapping titles. Even beginning to comprehend the towering structure of the Mechanicum far exceeded the limits of the human brain. But regardless, with the technology inside Moss's digital brain, it wouldn't be hard for him to rise to the rank of tech sage in the future. Eden had already thought of a title for him, Master of Ancient Machines. All right. Lord Moss, let us be off. Praise the Omnissiah. Moss said, leaning on his mechanical staff, his voice now a raspy electronic tone. Perfect. He was in character. Eden quickly led Moss out of the secret chamber. From now on, Moss would be the tech priest of the King's Court District. He had his own identity and residence, complete with servitors to assist him. Eden then took Moss to a mechanical factory within the district. The factory was scattered with strange, outdated machine parts, and it appeared to have been abandoned for a long time. Eden had brought Moss here primarily to meet the district's former mechanical engineers. Though Moss had the technical knowledge, whether he could apply it under current conditions remained to be seen. He needed specialized personnel to help him create what Eden wanted under the available constraints. As Eden and Moss arrived, a ragged, oil-leaking servitor greeted them. The servitor seemed sluggish as it spoke. Honored guests, please follow me. It led Eden and Moss to a location, opening a large steel door. As the door creaked open, a man dressed in a rust-red robe, similar to a tech priest, emerged. The man bore minor signs of mechanical augmentation, adorned with skulls and mechanical claws. He greeted them with an exaggerated enthusiasm that bordered on sycophantic. "By the Omnissiah, Governor, you've finally arrived." Eden scrutinized the man before him. "Salakal. You haven't been conducting any forbidden research, have you?" Kal's expression turned firm as he shook his head vigorously. "I swear by the Omnissiah, absolutely not." Suddenly, Kal noticed Moss and became visibly panicked. "Is this?" It was obvious that Moss appeared to be a tech priest, while Kal, on the other hand, was a mere impostor, never having received recognition from the Adeptus Mechanicus. Naturally, meeting a genuine tech priest had Kal in a panic. The Sala family, to which Kal belonged, had once been members of the Adeptus Mechanicus. His grandfather was a radical Magos explorator. But his grandfather's views on technology were so extreme that even other radicals considered them too dangerous. As a result, the Sala family was stripped of their status and titles, and exiled from their forge world. Eventually, the Sala family found refuge on Urth, under the patronage of the Grant family, providing technical support in return. The Sala family had long harbored dreams of restoring their former glory and continuing their journey down the path of the machine. But they had a penchant for researching forbidden technologies, which had caused quite a bit of trouble. Especially with Kal's generation, he had always claimed to be a tech priest. He even developed a so-called machine spirit link technology, which nearly destroyed the entire mechanical factory and surrounding area. But given the Sala family's centuries of contributions, Eden had spared Kal. Instead, he placed the family under surveillance, forbidding them from conducting further research, up until now. Seeing Kal's nervousness, Eden found it amusing but didn't expose him. "This is Lord Moss, a tech specialist from the Adeptus Mechanicus." Kal grew even more anxious. This was no ordinary tech priest but a high-ranking member with the title of sage. He awkwardly stammered a greeting. "Honored sage, I am." Facing Moss's cold, red cybernetic eyes, Kal could barely speak. Eden stepped in, pointing to him. "Kal, the tech adepts." Moss stared at Kal, then nodded. "Greetings, Kal. May the Omnissiah bless us." Since Moss had begun playing the role of a tech priest, he had taken to muttering mystical phrases and occasionally reciting binary code. But to outsiders, it all seemed very Mechanicum-like. "Praise the Omnissiah." Relieved that his cover wasn't blown, Kal finally exhaled. Eden had no intention of letting Moss or Kal learn the other's true identity. He planned to let these two impostors continue their charade. Through Moss and Kal, Eden intended to gradually rebuild the Adeptus Mechanicus structure, providing the King's Court district with technological support. Chapter 73, Rebuilding the Adeptus Mechanicus branch on Urth. With the technological support of the Adeptus Mechanicus, the development of the King's Court district would be greatly enhanced. Of course, this nominal Adeptus Mechanicus branch on Urth must be entirely loyal to Eden. With Moss, an absolutely loyal machine being, as the leader, loyalty shouldn't be an issue. Kal eagerly welcomed Eden and Moss into the room. As they sat down, a drone made from a human skull floated over, carrying cups. The skull was packed with mechanical components, its surface coated with oil, and its multiple mechanical arms gleamed, freshly polished. It offered each person a cup, then extended a pipe from its mouth. With a hiss, it filled each cup with a thick, oily liquid, some kind of tea. Everyone had a cup. Kal enthusiastically invited them. "Governor, Sage, please try it. This is a special mechanical fuel drink passed down by my Sala family. It's said to be a recipe gifted by a tech sage. Quite delicious, and very helpful in communing with the machine spirit." Saying this, he gulped it down, clearly enjoying himself. Eden stared at the tea, unwilling to drink it. "Isn't this just engine oil? Those tech priests not only heavily modified their bodies but even replaced their blood with special substances to prolong their lives. Who knows what strange things they would drink?" Then, to his astonishment, Eden watched as Moss calmly raised his cup and drank the beverage. After drinking, Moss seemed to feel invigorated and nodded, praising. "Not bad. Praise the Omnissiah. Eden? You can even drink?" Seeing Moss finish his drink, the skull drone floated over and refilled his cup. Noticing Moss's curiosity about the drone, Kal proudly introduced it. "Sage, this is a special modification of mine. Pretty impressive, isn't it?" As he spoke, he patted the smooth, shiny skull of the drone with pride. To be honest, this is my father. Eden froze for a moment before realizing what Call meant. Call was saying that the skull belonged to his father. Eden felt a bit unnerved. Call sure wasn't treating him like an outsider, having his father personally serve tea. In truth, Eden knew what this skull drone was, a servitor skull. In simple terms, servitor skulls were general-purpose drones in the Imperium, used by many organizations, including the Adeptus Mechanicus, who particularly favored them. Servitor skulls had various functions, such as battlefield communication, ammunition resupply, and serving as mechanical assistants. Especially among the powerful tech priests of the Adeptus Mechanicus, it was common to modify and enhance servitor skulls. Some were even equipped with powerful weapons and shield generators. It was much like how wealthy people in Eden's old world loved customizing sports cars, an expression of both power and technical skill. Moreover, the human skull symbolized purity in the Imperium, so human skulls were often used to create servitor skulls. However, not just any one skull could be used, only the most loyal servants of the Emperor were worthy of offering their skulls as materials. Thus, within the Imperium, especially in the Adeptus Mechanicus, having one skull made into a servitor skull after death was seen as a great honor. This was why Call proudly introduced his father's servitor skull. Of course, there was another layer to this. Call was shameless. According to the information Eden had, Call's father had fervently wished for his skull to be made into a servitor skull before his death. But due to his less than stellar record, it was a mercy that he wasn't put on trial. He was far from qualified to be used as a servitor skull. Yet it seemed Call had secretly fulfilled his father's wish by turning his skull into a servitor skull, albeit without proper authorization. In other words, Call had forged fake papers for his father and was now brazenly showing off in front of Eden, the governor. And as far as Eden remembered, Call's father had similarly turned his grandfather into a servitor skull. Also unauthorized. It seemed to be a family tradition of the Sali. Eden suddenly felt exhausted by the absurdity of it all. Forget it. After all, he had chosen these people himself. He would just pretend not to know about this. Later, he would have someone from the Internal Affairs Department update Call's father's records. However, Eden couldn't shake the feeling that Call might cause some serious trouble. But there was no better choice at the moment. He needed Call's audacity. After exchanging a few pleasantries, Eden got straight to the point, proposing the idea of funding the reconstruction of the Adeptus Mechanicus branch on Urth. This proposal was met with enthusiastic approval from both Moss and Call. Moss, of course, was just playing his role. But Call was genuinely eager to join in rebuilding the Adeptus Mechanicus branch. He could hardly wait. After all, he was desperate to solidify his counterfeit identity and become a true tech priest, restoring the glory of his family. As for his actual skills, well, at least his grandfather had been a tech sage. Call, in his mind, had perfectly inherited both his father's and grandfather's mechanical philosophies and had surpassed them. Of course, to the Adeptus Mechanicus, this only made him more of a heretic. But that didn't matter. In Eden's view, those who were loyal to the Emperor and even more loyal to him were the pillars of the Imperium. As for whether the reconstruction of the branch needed official approval from the Adeptus Mechanicus, Eden dismissed the idea entirely. Once the branch was established, it would have its own official recognition. The internal structure could simply approve itself. This approach had no problems whatsoever. Although the Adeptus Mechanicus was nominally united in their worship of the Omnissiah, internally, they were rife with countless subsects and conflicting doctrines. As the saying went, there are as many beliefs in the Adeptus Mechanicus as there are stars in the sky. Doctrinal wars like the infamous binary schism had left them in chaos. Some powerful Forge worlds openly defied the orders from Mars, engaging in technological heresy without any hesitation. So Eden had no need to worry about the Adeptus Mechanicus. With the Great Rift cutting off communications, he had the perfect opportunity to set up his own operation. As long as it grew strong, everything else would fall into place. Soon, Eden, Moss, and Call reached an agreement to rebuild the Adeptus Mechanicus branch on Urth. Moss would be the branch's chief overseer, with Call as his assistant. They would also select appropriate personnel for evaluation, with those passing the tests becoming new members of the branch. Of course, this selection method was only temporary. In the future, they planned to use vat-grown individuals, with data-linked knowledge being implanted into them in the fetal stage, allowing them to quickly begin working. A few days later, the location for the Adeptus Mechanicus branch was finalized: Call's mechanical factory. A statue of the great Omnissiah was erected at the entrance to the factory. The base of the statue was inscribed with the following credo. Nothing will stop your pursuit of knowledge. No one will hinder your quest for sacred technology. None shall prevent you from standing beneath the machine god. On the day of the official inauguration, Eden led the officials of the King's Court district to witness the founding of the Adeptus Mechanicus branch. The ceremony took place in front of the Omnissiah statue at the factory entrance. Moss pulled the lever, igniting the flames within the factory, starting the engines. And then, the hymn echoed. Ring the great bell once. Pull the lever, start the pistons and the pumps. Ring the great bell twice. Press the button, fire the engines, ignite the turbines, and breathe life into them. Ring the great bell thrice. Sing in unison, and praise the Omnissiah. As the enormous gears of the factory began to turn, and the roar of steam filled the air, the Adeptus Mechanicus of Urth was officially established. Chapter 74, Building the Farm and Expanding the Army. After the Adeptus Mechanicus branch was established on Urth, Eden gave them their first task, to construct a new green wave farm. The current food reserves would only last for about 6 months. If the farm wasn't built quickly to grow new crops, the King's Court district would once again fall into famine after those 6 months. Thus, the construction of the farm could not be delayed. Following Moss's survey, the location for the new farm was selected in the large warehouse district within the King's Court. It had vast open space and ample sunlight. Using Golden Age farming technology, along with special energy cores, seed cultivation devices, fertilizer machines, simulated weather systems, and water purification units from the original farm, Moss and Call, the 2 tech priests, designed a massive vertical farm. Of course, this was only the construction plan, it would take a long time to complete the entire farm. The farm would need to be built step by step. Once the design was completed, the King's Court began the grand first phase of the new Green Wave Farm's construction. To prevent sabotage from the Hoffman family, the surrounding area was cleared, and strict security measures were put in place. Fortunately, the farm was located in the core of the King's Court district, making it difficult to attack. Had it been located further out, it would have been subjected to endless attacks and harassment. Soon, the first phase of the new Green Wave Farm was completed. The expected food output would cover the minimum consumption needs of the district's population, ensuring a sustainable cycle. However, it would take much longer to fully construct the farm, and it hadn't yet achieved full automation. The main reason for this was that manual labor in the King's Court was far cheaper than machines. So, the crops would be planted and cared for by dedicated farm workers. This was considered a sacred job, and only the most loyal and enthusiastic families were selected to become farm workers. Those chosen arrived at the farm and saw, for the first time in their lives, the legendary soil. Yes, Eden had also transported a large amount of unpolluted, high-quality soil from the original Green Wave Farm. Those who witnessed the soil wept, kneeling and kissing it, grateful for the mercy of the great God Emperor and the benevolence of Governor Eden. With a sense of divine purpose, they tended to every seedling with care, as if they were nurturing infants. Soon, the seedlings were planted, and the farm was operating smoothly. To prevent incidents, Eden stationed security drones brought from the original Green Wave Farm around the perimeter. Surprisingly, the energy cannons on those drones managed to eliminate several spies trying to infiltrate the farm. With the farm up and running, Eden turned his attention to other matters. During the farm's construction, he had already summoned the leaders of the defense forces, ARI and Ks, and authorized them to start recruitment. Eden planned to expand the defense forces from 30,000 to 80,000 troops. The King's Court district had plenty of weapons and equipment, but couldn't afford to support that many people before. Now, with enough food, he immediately expanded the force by 50,000 soldiers. This was the maximum number the district could support. Eden didn't need to worry about the recruitment or training. ARI and Ks handled it entirely. They looked like legendary figures and would undoubtedly train a powerful defense force for him. At the same time, Eden tasked Moss and Call with researching the security drones and optimizing the standard-issue laser rifles and cannons. Now, the entire district was preparing for the final war effort, focusing all resources on the production of war materials. Once the defense forces were trained and equipped with new weapons, Eden planned to launch the decisive battle. He would personally lead the Royal Guard and defense forces into action, to finally eliminate the Hoffman family and unite the upper hive. As recruitment progressed and resources were allocated, the mass enlistment began. Young and middle-aged men alike signed up in droves, determined to fight to the death for the King's Court district. At the entrance of the recruitment office, a frail, middle-aged man failed to meet the enlistment criteria. He knelt on the ground, pleading with the defense forces to make an exception and take him in. In the past, someone like him would have been considered a qualified recruit. But with the improved food supply, people's physical conditions had greatly improved. The frail and sickly like him no longer met the enlistment standards. The man's eyes were resolute. "Officer, please accept me. I am determined to give everything for the God Emperor and the Governor." He had no other options. His family consisted of 5 members: an elderly mother, a wife recently paralyzed due to a work injury, and 2 young children. He was the sole breadwinner. In the current situation, there was no way he could support so many people. His only hope was to join the defense forces, the only way to save his family. The pay for soldiers was more than double that of regular workers. Becoming an officer meant he would receive Type 2 corpse starch bars with 1/10 wheat content. With such a salary, he could easily support his family. Even if he died in battle, the compensation would sustain his family for some time. If he became a war hero, his name could be inscribed beneath the statue of the God Emperor. That would be the ultimate honor bestowed by the governor. The children of war heroes would be given priority to join the defense forces. If they didn't want to join the army, they could instead receive good jobs in the district's major factories. The most outstanding children had a chance to join the future Academy of Loyalty, which Eden planned to establish. They would study alongside the children of nobles and officials, being groomed as the future elite of the district. In Eden's vision, the Academy of Loyalty would be different from the Empire's original academy of the same name. It would be slightly less brutal, though there was still a risk of casualties during training. The academy would admit and educate children from various backgrounds based on their loyalty and merit. This would include the children of heroes, nobles, officials, and even child prodigies. They would study together and grow into the future leaders of the district. Of course, the Academy of Loyalty was still in the planning stage, and there weren't yet conditions to establish it. But even the mere possibility of such an opportunity was enough to drive the lower-class population to madness. They were determined to join the defense forces and offer everything to the merciful governor. The middle-aged man was one of them. Whether to feed his family or for his family's future, he had to fight. Yet he was rejected, and he couldn't accept it. No matter how he begged, he was coldly turned away. "Please, let me join. This is my last hope." The man cried and pleaded, kneeling and kowtowing, even grabbing onto the officer's leg. But the officer's gaze only grew colder. Citing a disturbance of order, the officer whipped the man several times and had him dragged away by defense force soldiers. Had it not been for the governor's new regulations, someone like him would have been executed on the spot. "What's going on here?" Eri walked over, his brow furrowed, the cold red glow of his mechanical eye scanning the scene. The officer calmly reported the situation to Eri. The middle-aged man begged Eri, his gaze resolute. "Commander, I can fight. I'm willing to give my life for the governor." Chapter 75, Life is Precious Nourishment. The middle-aged man had made up his mind no matter the cost, he would stay. Eri, with a cold expression, stared at the man for a moment before firmly rejecting him. "Sorry, but you don't meet the requirements to join the defense forces. With your frail condition, you'd just be marching to your death on the battlefield. I need soldiers who can fight and follow orders. I am responsible for my army and for the governor. Now, leave immediately. If you continue to disrupt discipline, you will be executed according to military law." The middle-aged man was soon dragged away by defense force soldiers. Eri understood and pitied the poor man. But in the army, and on the battlefield, excessive compassion could be deadly. A man as weak as that would only die meaninglessly in battle, potentially endangering his fellow soldiers. To put it bluntly, not everyone was worthy of giving their life for the great and merciful governor. You can't just grab a gun, rush into battle, and die for the governor. It's not that simple. You must first have the qualifications and undergo rigorous training before you even have the chance to carry a newly made laser rifle and offer everything for the governor on the battlefield. Otherwise, it's a waste and a desecration of the governor's generosity. That being said, the family of the middle-aged man wouldn't be left to starve. Life could generate hope, and for Eden, that hope was precious nourishment. Eden wasn't a chaos god, but he wouldn't let life go to waste so easily. Allowing loyal lives to be squandered was a costly extravagance. He would ensure that every life fulfilled its potential. As the middle-aged man trudged home, devastated, Eden had already passed a new law. This law would provide half of a Type I corpse starch bar, with 1/20th wheat content, to special families in extreme difficulty within the district. While this small portion wouldn't eliminate hunger, it would at least sustain life. This would offer a glimmer of hope to those families, allowing them to survive the hardest times. After this brief episode, Eri inspected the rest of the recruitment office before heading back to the barracks. He needed to train the young recruits hard, increasing their combat capabilities. Only by doing so could they win the war against the damn Hoffman family, ensuring that more of his soldiers would survive. All for the infinitely merciful governor. While the king's court was mobilizing for war, Eden kept a close eye on the situation within the Hoffman family's territory. He could sense the darkness within their lands growing deeper. The power of darkness was slowly increasing, and he knew he had to act quickly. To weaken the Hoffman family's strength, Eden took a page from Yusef's book and sent out numerous spies to disrupt their territory. However, his method wasn't through chaos corruption, inciting rebellion, or spreading rumors. Those were the dirty tactics of small-minded people. Eden opted for a direct attack. He ordered his spies to regularly distribute Type I corpse starch bars, with 1/20th wheat content, and large quantities of propaganda flyers throughout the Hoffman family's territory. These bars and flyers conveyed a clear message to the people of the Hoffman lands. The King's Court district had enough food, and under the God Emperor's name, they vowed to accept any who dared to break away from the Hoffman family and offer their loyalty to the governor. This tactic was highly effective. In the following days, wave after wave of people secretly fled the Hoffman family's lands to pledge their loyalty to the great governor Eden Grant. This greatly strengthened the King's Court district. Inside a secret laboratory within the Hoffman family's territory, a mutated grey rat, covered in scars, cowered in a corner, fearfully watching the hateful human named Yusef. Lately, it had been receiving less and less fresh meat, and Yusef had become more and more erratic, beating it senseless at the slightest provocation. It was completely unreasonable. Though the grey rat's eyes were filled with terror, its round, beady eyes were secretly scanning for an escape route, hoping to flee when the opportunity presented itself. Of course, it had already tried a few times but had failed each time, only to be beaten even worse. Humans were terrifying, far more brutal than it was. The rat couldn't take it anymore. Despair welled up within it, and it let out a few pitiful squeaks. Hearing the sound, Yusef flew into a rage. "Damn rat! Are you mocking me?" Raising his mechanical arm, he retracted his hand to reveal a gaping cannon barrel, firing 2 blasts toward the rat. Boom! Boom! The grey rat took both blasts head-on, its body charred and its once wide eyes now shut. It lay on its back, belly up, motionless. If one looked closely, a single tear could be seen sliding down its face. The rat's heart had died. It didn't dare move, and the lab workers barely dared to breathe. Recently, anyone who angered Lord Yusef had seen their entire family fed to the god spawn birthed by the thousand-eyed master. Yusef was furious. He had suffered the greatest humiliation of his life. All of his flawless schemes had been easily unraveled by that fool Eden. Many of the spies he had sent had lost contact. Yusef couldn't comprehend how Eden, that coward, had managed to secure food. In the end, he could only conclude that the food and farming technology came from the Grant family's vault. Like the royal guard, they must have been treasures safeguarded by the Grant family. Eden, that despicable man, had been hiding his strength all along, waiting to make a mockery of him. And to top it off, that scoundrel had even sent him a letter of thanks. Yusef felt as though he had been deceived and mocked, much like his ancestors had been by the Grant family 3,000 years ago. The humiliation was unbearable. However, Yusef had seen through Eden's devious plan. That sly trickster was trying to provoke him into rashly starting the final battle. But Yusef, the great Yusef, would never fall for such a simple trick. The King's Court core had been maintained and fortified for 3,000 years. Even after the heretical rebellion, the remaining defensive weapons were incredibly powerful. Attacking now, before the true offspring of the thousand-eyed master had hatched, would be a foolish act of self-destruction. In fact, Yusef hoped Eden would lose patience and attack soon. Then, Eden could enjoy the chaotic gift Yusef had prepared for him. With that realization, Yusef quickly calmed down and devised a response. If Eden cared so much for those underhive peasants, then Yusef would make sure he didn't get his way. Humph, the Grant family's full strength is now exposed. When the time for the final battle comes, victory will be mine. At that moment, in the refugee camp within the Hoffman family's territory, Many refugees from the King's Court district were gathered there. Most of them had been incited and manipulated by spies, leading them to betray the district, branding them as undesirable elements. During the night of the uprising, they had rioted, looting, and burning, but were suppressed by the enforcers. Some had scattered and barely escaped the streets alive. After the night of the uprising, fearing retribution from the King's Court, they fled, either alone or with their families, to the Hoffman family's territory. But upon arrival, they didn't receive the promised shelter or food. Instead, they were thrown into this refugee camp. Later, they learned that the King's Court had resumed food distribution, offering delicious wheat-infused corpse starch bars. Their regret was palpable. They cursed the King's Court and the damn governor. Why didn't he provide food sooner? If he had, they wouldn't have made such a mistake. Now, they planned to escape the camp that very night and return to the King's Court. Hadn't the flyers promised that anyone who escaped the Hoffman lands and offered their loyalty would be accepted? If they returned in good faith, the King's Court couldn't refuse them otherwise, it would be an affront to the God Emperor himself. Chapter 76, The Approach of War. The traitors cursed and mocked the King's Court district and the governor, ridiculing their foolishness. They planned to seize the opportunity tonight to sneak out of the refugee camp and escape from the Hoffman family's territory. Then, posing as refugees from the Hoffman lands, they would boldly return to the King's Court. This way, they could not only evade punishment but also enjoy the wheat-infused corpse starch offered by the district. As they eagerly discussed their plan, filled with anticipation, the atmosphere suddenly changed. Everyone, look! What's going on? Unbeknownst to them, the refugee camp had been surrounded by the Hoffman family's riot control troops. Dressed in black protective suits and skull-faced breathing masks, the troops carried standard-issue automatic rifles, coldly staring at the refugees. Soon, as the officer with the skull mask and glowing green electronic eyes waved his command sword, the riot troops silently advanced in neat formation. There was a deathly silence, with only the sound of synchronized footsteps echoing coldly and mercilessly. These were the forces of the Hoffman family, the backbone that gave them the audacity to rebel against the King's Court. These riot troops had undergone brutal training from a young age, even having parts of their nervous systems removed. They were silent, unafraid of death, driven solely by killing and sacrifice. The traitors who had been so brazen during the night of the uprising now trembled like sheep. What are you doing? What's going on? Didn't Lord Yusef promise to protect us? Sirs, we are loyal subjects of the Hoffman family. Please, spare our lives. Some of them tried to sound tough, others attempted to reason, while some knelt with their families, begging for mercy. They swore their loyalty to Lord Yusef, vowing eternal enmity against the King's Court, desperately pleading for their lives and the lives of their families. However, none of their actions stirred even the slightest emotion in the riot troops. The troops simply followed orders, advancing in formation and then opening fire, killing all designated targets. The slaughter was merciless. The refugee camp echoed with the cries and wails of the traitors, but it was all in vain. The riot troops killed them one by one, stepping over their corpses to reach the next in line, all with deadly precision and restraint. Before long, the refugee camp fell silent. The riot troops emerged from the camp, reassembled like the precise components of a machine, each returning to their designated position. Then, the synchronized sound of their footsteps resumed as they marched away, leaving behind a camp filled with corpses. This wasn't limited to the refugee camp. Similar scenes were unfolding across the Hoffman family's territory. Countless people were being slaughtered, and their blood and flesh were offered as sacrifices to the godspawn granted by the thousand-eyed master. In a secret underground laboratory, vast quantities of flesh were dumped into a giant glass incubation vat, where the grotesque ball of flesh inside hungrily devoured it. The creature grew larger, its numerous eyes blinking slowly, as if it was about to fully open. In the King's Court district, within the Imperial Church, the hymn of the cherubim echoed through the halls as Bishop Doni knelt before the shrine of the God Emperor, conducting his daily prayer ritual. Though he had aged somewhat, his eagle-like gaze remained as sharp as ever. The situation in the King's Court had improved significantly. The statue of the God Emperor had been fully restored, and the Emperor had performed a miracle during the holy rites. This had reignited the people's faith in the God Emperor. Though the church had not yet fully reopened to the public, more and more people were coming to worship. The church was gradually reclaiming its former glory. Praise the God Emperor! It seemed the imperial church on Earth wouldn't perish under his watch, and might even rise to greater heights. Bishop Donny felt immense relief, as if the heavy burden he had been carrying was slowly being lifted. Suddenly, his body trembled, and he nearly collapsed. The cherubim flying above him let out cries of fear, their wings flailing as they almost crashed to the ground. Bishop Donny's psychic senses had picked up something terrifying. God Emperor, what an abyssal darkness! And at the heart of that darkness was the upper hive, within the Hoffman family's territory. In a flash, Bishop Donny recalled the terrifying catastrophe from 5 years ago. The heretical rebels had stormed the king's court, led by a monstrous chaos high priest, defiling the statue of the God Emperor. Though the heretics had eventually been judged and eradicated by the church itself had nearly been destroyed. Now, those accursed heretics had returned, and the dark power they wielded this time was even more fearsome. But the king's court no longer possessed the strength it once had. Donny himself, worn down by injury, could no longer fight as he once had. How could they possibly resist? Was the fate of Urth to be total annihilation? Great God Emperor, what should we do? Bishop Donny muttered in despair, his body hunched. After a moment, he seemed to realize something and stood up, grabbing his staff and hurrying out. Of course, he had asked a foolish question earlier. The God Emperor had long since given them guidance and chosen the savior of Urth, the young ruler, Eden Grant. He would lead them all to the path forward. Bishop Donny immediately went to the Spire Manor to find Eden, urgently informing him of the gravity of the situation. The heretics had returned. Looking at Eden, Bishop Donny anxiously awaited his decision. Governor, this is a matter of life and death for the king's court and all of Urth. We must act swiftly. Eden's face was solemn. He had already foreseen the dark, overwhelming chaos power long before Bishop Donny. He had been nervously preparing, making the final war mobilizations. The defense forces had been expanded to 60,000 strong, most of them equipped with the latest laser rifles and new gear. However, the speed at which the chaos forces were growing had caught Eden off guard. It was too fast. If the transformation completed and chaos descended upon the upper hive, there would be no way to stop it. There was no time left. Eden quickly made his decision, turning to Beof. Notify all departments the plan is moving up. We launch the final battle at dawn tomorrow. With the order given, the entire district was mobilized overnight, preparing for war. They had to ensure that all armed forces were ready to deploy on schedule. No one dared to be complacent. Everyone knew that this would be the final battle. The outcome of this war would determine the fate of the king's court and the entire planet of Urth. Chapter 77, The Final Battle. Eden stood on the balcony of Spire Manor, overlooking the brightly lit king's court district. The entire district had come alive, preparing for the war that would decide everything. It had all happened too soon. 4 days, Eden had been waiting. Waiting for the defense forces to be fully expanded, waiting for the new weapons developed by the Adeptus Mechanicus to roll out. But most importantly, he was waiting for the people's hope to materialize. After the Emperor's Ascension Day holy rites, he had regained more of his power and could now use new abilities. At present, Eden's abilities included psychic perception, creating illusions, teleportation, blessing. The latter two, teleportation and blessing, were new abilities he had recently unlocked. He had already tested the power of teleportation, even using it to solve the food crisis in the king's court. However, he had never used his blessing ability. Both the Chaos Gods and the God Emperor wielded this power to create powerful servants to serve them. Examples included the Chaos Gods' greater demons and the Emperor's living saints. Such examples were numerous. They could even bless ordinary mortals, twisting them into terrifying creatures. Blessing was an extraordinarily powerful ability, a privilege exclusive to deities. Now, Eden also possessed this power. He could use it to create powerful warriors or living saints. However, the cost of blessing was immense. Not only did it require choosing the right candidate, but it also consumed vast amounts of energy. That's why the Chaos Gods set so many trials, to select the best vessel. But Eden had no such luxury. He could only control the small territory of the king's court district, with very few suitable candidates to choose from. The bigger problem was energy. To perform a single blessing, he needed at least 1 million hope points. After food supplies were restored in the king's court, Eden had passed several laws to improve the lives of its citizens, attempting to cultivate their hope as much as possible. He had done everything he could. Yet even now, he had only gathered just over 800,000 hope points. It wasn't enough to use the blessing ability. Eden felt regretful. If only he had more time to gather enough hope points, he could bless a powerful warrior. That would give him a much greater chance of defeating the Hoffman family and destroying the Chaos creatures. Unfortunately, time was not on Eden's side. Tomorrow was the day of the final battle, and he wasn't entirely sure he could win. After all, the enemy had a Chaos-spawned embryo, nearly ready to be born. This battle would be a life-or-death struggle. If he lost, he would lose his only territory, the millions of followers who served as his fuel, and possibly even his mortal body. After that, he would have no choice but to slink away into the warp. He would become a weak, low-level god, with no potential for growth. That was something Eden absolutely could not accept. If only there were a faster way to gather hope points. As Eden pondered this, a brilliant idea struck him. He immediately summoned Beof and gave him the order. Announce the final battle to the entire king's court. Tell them the reasons behind this war and our determination to win. Tomorrow, all families and friends, everyone is welcome to see off our soldiers as they march to battle. When the sun rose, the King's Court's Royal Guard, defense forces and enforcer units gathered at the Holy Square, ready for deployment. All combat forces would be mobilized. Soon, Eden, clad in golden power armor, stood before his soldiers. He looked out at them, giving his final pre-battle speech. Citizens of Urth. The enemy's claws have reached our home, seeking to destroy everything we hold dear. Now is the time to fight, my unyielding warriors. You stand in the light of the God Emperor, your courage burning as bright as the stars. Let us raise our weapons high and defend our homeland. His powerful voice boomed through the mechanical speakers, inspiring the soldiers in the square and resonating throughout the king's court. At the end of his speech, Eden drew his power sword and raised it high, its blade instantly igniting with flames. For the God Emperor, victory is ours. Victory! 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 The soldiers roared, their blood boiling with passion. Move out! With the motivational speech over, Eden immediately gave the order to march. As assault ships took off, ground forces began moving as well. The defense forces' armored tanks and combat machines led the way, followed by the main combat units of the defense forces and enforcers. At the rear were artillery and long-range sniper squads. They moved down the main road of the King's Court, heading toward the Hoffman family's territory. The people of the district had already heard the news of the final battle. The sudden announcement shocked everyone. The King's Court had only just restored its food supplies, and things were starting to prosper. How had it come to a life-or-death battle against the Hoffman family so quickly? And the Hoffman family had become terrifying heretics, aiming to kill everyone. Though the people were frightened and worried, they had hope. They hoped that under the leadership of the governor, the King's Court could win this final battle. That they could eradicate the heretics once and for all, so everyone could be freed from suffering. Gradually, the citizens gathered. They lined the sides of the main road, watching with anticipation as the soldiers marched away. Family and friends of the soldiers called out their names, offering precious food or charms for protection. Many others prayed in silence. They prayed that the great God Emperor would protect the soldiers of the King's Court and let them win the battle and return alive. These soldiers carried the hopes of everyone. This plan worked. Hope was gathering. Eden could clearly feel the hope surging in from the main road, and from all across the district. The hope points rose to 950,000 and were still slowly increasing. It still wasn't enough. But there was no other way. The final battle had already begun. He had to win. The army would divide into 3 groups. They would use their overwhelming numerical advantage to attack the Hoffman family from all sides, drawing their firepower. Eden, meanwhile, would lead Carter and the Royal Guard aboard the largest assault ship. Their mission was to find the source of the chaos power and eliminate it before it fully manifested. Half a day later, when the King's Court's self-propelled artillery fired the first shot into the Hoffman family's territory, the entire upper hive erupted into the sound of battle. All around, forces clashed as the fires of war spread. The soldiers roared as they fired, their bullets and lasers cutting through enemy lines. The self-propelled artillery thundered, bombarding the enemy's rear. Armored tanks crashed through buildings, charging toward critical enemy targets. Assault ships dodged the barrage of anti-air fire, dropping powerful bombs on enemy positions. This was the final battle. Chapter 78, Sacrificing Everything for the Governor. In the Hoffman family's mansion, the sounds of artillery boomed outside while screams echoed within. Blood spilled across the floor, pooling at Yusef's feet. "Why are you doing this, Child. Old Hoffman, a frail, white-haired elder in red robes, looked at Yusef, trembling with sadness in his eyes. To live up to your teachings, Yusef replied emotionlessly. Behind them, the slaughter continued. Masked soldiers wielding blades butchered the members of the Hoffman family one by one, sealing their bodies in containers. Old Hoffman sighed deeply. Of course, he knew. This was the child he had raised. He had pinned his greatest hopes on Yusef, his 14th, illegitimate grandson. To the point of using a data link to transfer the entire legacy of the Hoffman family into Yusef's mind when he was still an infant. He had engraved the family's shameful 3,000-year history into Yusef's consciousness. By the time Yusef could walk, old Hoffman was already teaching him the art of scheming, nurturing his ambition. On Yusef's 6th birthday, old Hoffman ordered him to brutally murder his best playmate, teaching him that the best heirs of the Hoffman family needed no emotions. The only reason he lived was to erase the shame of the Hoffman family and claim the position that had eluded them for millennia. Old Hoffman's education was successful. Yusef had grown into exactly what he wanted, exceptional and ambitious. Through a series of calculated schemes and bloodshed, Yusef had risen to become the head of the Hoffman family, launching a revenge campaign against the Grant family with notable success. The price was the deaths of dozens of family members, including several of old Hoffman's grandchildren and Yusef's father, his eldest son. But old Hoffman believed it was all worth it. Revenge always came with pain and despair, that was the price. Under Yusef's leadership, the Hoffman family would achieve vengeance and rise to new heights. But over time, things began to exceed old Hoffman's expectations. Yusef's desire for revenge was far stronger than he had imagined. He was willing to pay any price. To avenge the Hoffman family, Yusef had even turned to chaos, using his own sister's body as a vessel to nurture a chaos embryo. He had slaughtered the peasants under Hoffman's rule to feed the growing chaos creature. While difficult to accept, old Hoffman could endure it if it meant success. But now, Yusef planned to sacrifice the entire Hoffman family, including himself, to the cursed chaos creature. That price was too high for old Hoffman. If the Hoffman family no longer existed, what was the point of revenge? Looking at Yusef, the heir he had placed all his hopes on, old Hoffman suddenly felt a twinge of regret. He had created a monster, and the cost had been unbearable. Do it! As the cries of his kin fell silent, old Hoffman quietly accepted his fate. Thrust! Yusef stabbed old Hoffman in the chest. It was the same knife Yusef had used years ago to slowly torment his best friend to death. Old Hoffman coughed violently, blood spilling from his mouth. With a final look of expectation in his eyes, he gave Yusef his final instruction. Child, don't let our sacrifice be in vain. If everything was now beyond saving, then they would offer the lives of every Hoffman to strike the fiercest blow against the Grant family. This was old Hoffman's final thought. As long as Yusef succeeded, his life's efforts would not have been wasted. Old Hoffman would not have failed. By the time Yusef pulled out the knife, old Hoffman had taken his last breath. The old fool! I'm Yusef. How could I ever lose? Yusef muttered, tears streaming down his face. But they were tears of excitement. He trembled with anticipation. Today, once he sacrificed the blood and bones of the Hoffman family to complete the ritual, the offspring of the thousand-eyed master would descend. Yusef gave the order for all combat units to hold off the king's court forces at any cost. He only needed a little more time. Once the ritual was complete, the Grant family and everyone in the king's court would die. Come on, boys! Attack! Kill those damned cyborgs! On the Hoffman family's second line of defense, gunfire and explosions echoed. Eri stood atop a damaged armored tank, wielding a massive, customized machine gun, raining bullets on the enemy. Shell casings piled up like a mountain around him. Seeing the enemy suppressed, Eri charged forward, leading his troops in an all-out assault. As always, Eri led the charge through a hailstorm of bullets. Rounds whizzed by, but none hit him. This was the legendary Eri, blessed by the God Emperor, the unkillable one who always led the charge. As Eri and his men surged forward, the Hoffman soldiers fell one after another. Though the Hoffman soldiers had undergone nerve modifications and showed no fear of death, they were no match for the king's court forces, who held both numerical and technological superiority. Especially when it came to equipment. The soldiers of the king's court were armed with advanced laser rifles, which outperformed the Hoffman family's outdated weapons in both speed and accuracy. However, halfway through the advance, something terrible happened. The Hoffman soldiers injected themselves with a special chaos serum, transforming into monstrous abominations. These creatures charged at Erai's defense forces, tearing through one soldier after another. Damn heretics! Erai roared, rushing into a swarm of monsters to save one of his men. But just as a monster lunged at him, a blast from an energy cannon vaporized it. Damn slippery kid, you finally showed up, Erai spat. It was Case, leading his long-range sniper squad. They were armed with the latest energy cannons developed by Sage Moss, powerful and precise, though their slow charging speed limited them to support roles. Fight! 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 Erai launched an assault on the monsters, with his men following suit. They had to use their bodies to hold off the abominations, allowing the sniper squad to lock on and take them out. No one backed down, this was a battle they couldn't afford to lose. Their home was right behind them. And their sacrifices would not be in vain. They would be honored as war heroes, their names etched onto the stone beneath the God Emperor's feet as symbols of loyalty. Their families would be cared for, and their children would have the chance to enter the Loyalist Academy. They would give everything for the governor. The soldiers used their bodies to block the monsters, giving the sniper squad time to lock on and blow both monsters and men to pieces. Similar scenes were playing out everywhere. The King's Court forces continued to push forward, gradually breaching the Hoffman family's third line of defense. Boom! 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 Dozens of anti-aircraft cannons fired, blowing up assault ships one after another. With the decoy drones' help, Eden's assault ship finally broke through the anti-air defenses, reaching the core of the Hoffman family's territory. Chapter 79, Seeing Everything Can Only Harm You. The assault ship had finally broken through into the core area of the Hoffman family's stronghold. Upon receiving the report, Eden, sitting in the cabin, let out a sigh of relief. The anti-air network of the Hoffman family had been incredibly tight, and the ship's shields had almost failed. But luckily, they made it through. Now, it was time to execute the next phase of the plan. Eden closed his eyes and activated his psychic sense with all his might. An almost imperceptible psychic wave expanded outward from Eden, rapidly spreading across the surrounding area and beyond, eventually covering the entire core region of the Hoffman family. As his psychic sense enveloped the area, a flood of information surged into his mind. Eden could feel the taint of chaos everywhere, the people's screams of agony, their prayers of despair. They were begging for the God Emperor's protection. But this place had been cut off. All their prayers were being heard by some unknown entity that had answered their calls instead. There was so much darkness, deeply saturating this place. Eden pushed aside his shock, focusing on filtering through the interference as he traced the thickest trail of chaos. The deeper he reached, the stronger and clearer the chaos became. He knew he was close to finding the source of this foul power. Guided by his psychic trail, Eden's mind arrived above a dilapidated building, where a secret entrance lay hidden. Descending further, he finally reached a massive underground laboratory. Inside, a dozen giant glass cylinders stood, each filled with grotesque chaos monstrosities. Going deeper still, Eden at last spotted the target of his mission. It was a 10-meter-high cylinder, containing a deformed woman. Her upper body and legs were shriveled, resembling dried twigs, but her stomach had swollen into an enormous, multi-meter-wide mass of flesh, covered in pitch-black eyes. That mass was a gigantic woe*B, and within it, a dark shadow writhed, seemingly brimming with life. The creature's movements were unmistakable, its birth was imminent. Then, Eden sensed a faint connection between the abomination and some distant entity. On instinct, he manipulated his psychic power to follow that thin thread further. Suddenly wham! In an instant, Eden's hair stood on end, his scalp prickling with fear as icy dread washed over him. With all the strength he could muster, Eden slammed the brakes on his psychic probe, stopping himself from going any further. For he had seen something, a massive shadow lurking behind the enormous cylinder. It was an ever-shifting presence, floating mid-air. Its head and body were one, with two grotesque, indescribable tendrils protruding from it. Its skin crawled with constantly changing faces. The moment he saw this being, Eden felt as though countless eyes had turned toward him, seeing through his very soul. Luckily, the terrifying entity didn't move or show any signs of interest in him. Seeing that the horrific figure had no reaction, Eden slowly and carefully retracted his psychic powers. Only when he exited the lab did he whip his psychic presence back into his body with all the speed he could muster. Whoosh! Eden's eyes snapped open, his heart pounding, his body drenched in cold sweat. Damn, seeing everything will only get you killed. It was terrifying. That entity, could it be Tseentch? Tseentch, one of the 4 chaos gods, the most cunning and deceitful, symbolizing twisted wisdom, a master of endless schemes and plots. He thrived on chaos, and his followers were often scholars craving forbidden knowledge or ambitious nobles. Eden sighed. He had barely been in the Warhammer 40k universe for long, yet he had already encountered 2 chaos gods, Slaanesh and now Tseentch. Of course, he had met them, but they didn't know him. If they knew who he was, he'd be dead in an instant. To be honest, even slitting his own throat probably wouldn't help in such a situation. If a chaos god ever truly noticed him in reality, there would be no escape. He would likely be twisted and corrupted beyond recognition. Thankfully, his psychic sense had stopped in time, avoiding disaster. Still, Eden couldn't shake the memory of what he had seen in that final moment. The more he thought about it, the more unsettled he felt. Did it smile at him? Had it really noticed him? Eden quickly suppressed these terrifying thoughts. No matter, he had his own powerful backer after all. If things got desperate, he could always hide with the God Emperor. But for now, the priority was to deal with the monstrosity inside that lab. Eden immediately relayed the location of the secret lab to the special forces. Meanwhile, the assault ship he was on sharply veered towards the lab's coordinates, accelerating. As Eden's ship arrived at the lab, several more assault ships, assisted by decoys, broke through the anti-air defenses and joined them. Wearing his golden power armor and wielding a power sword, Eden was the first to leap from the assault ship to the ground. Behind him, dozens of elite guards, led by Carter, followed, forming a defensive perimeter around him. The battle had begun. Eden and his elite guards charged towards the building housing the lab. Soon, several squads of Hoffman family cyborg guards arrived. They silently formed ranks and raised their guns. Bang! Before the squad leader could lift his command sword, his head exploded like a watermelon. Eden had drawn his golden bolt pistol, embedded with the symbol of the Grant family's golden lion, and blown the leader's head off with a single shot. He holstered the pistol and raised his hand. At his signal, the elite guards stepped forward, raising their bolt guns and firing at the Hoffman soldiers. Boom! The bolt guns roared, and blood mist exploded throughout the enemy ranks. The cyborgs were torn to shreds by the explosive, rocket-propelled shells, their bodies left unrecognizable. This was the foundation of the Grant family's rule, the Governor's Angels of War, the elite guard. After clearing the cyborg squad, Eden led his elite forces, sweeping through all opposition, cutting down anyone who dared stand in their way. They broke through multiple obstacles, making their way into the deepest parts of the secret lab. In the lab's cultivation zone, scientists frantically tossed chunks of flesh into a massive pool, conducting the final stages of the sacrificial ritual. Yusef stared at the twisted flesh ball inside the giant cultivation cylinder. The fetus within was moving more and more violently. It would only be a short while before the true offspring of the thousand-eyed master descended upon this world. This would be the ultimate weapon, capable of deciding everything. All would tremble before the overwhelming power granted by the thousand-eyed master. Gradually, Yusef heard the sound of gunfire and screams from the perimeter of the lab, but he remained unshaken. He knew it was Eden, that incompetent fool. And he had been waiting for this moment for so long. End of chapter. Check out my Patreon for plus 20 extra chapters on all my fanfics. For only $5. www.patreon.com/Zalum. Plus 500 power stones equals plus 1 extra chapter. Thank you for your support. Chapter 80, Destroy the Target? After throwing the remains of the Hoffman family members into the pool, the experimenters worked together to pull the massive metal lever. As the lever was pulled, the ground trembled, and the mechanical devices buried beneath the lab began to operate. The blood-red pool reacted instantly, with the flesh dissolving and boiling, producing continuous bubbles. Then, the mechanical conduits extracted all of the crimson liquid and injected it into the giant glass incubation tank. Inside the tank, the dried-up body of a woman screamed and writhed, twisting uncontrollably. Her stomach, bloated to the extreme and covered in black eyeballs, pulsed and shrank as it ravenously absorbed the red liquid. It was so hungry, eager to devour the nutrients. It was also full of joy. The joy was so intense that it spread to everyone outside the tank, causing them to smile involuntarily. The black-robed cultists of the Cult of the Broken Eye were particularly joyous and fanatical. They grinned with twisted expressions, laughing silently. Kneeling around the incubation tank, they fervently praised the great master of the Thousand Eyes. As the cultists' fervent prayers echoed, the woe*be-like mass inside the tank began emitting a heartbeat-like sound. Thump, 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 thump. The sound grew louder and louder, until it resonated throughout the entire laboratory, each heartbeat seemingly pounding in people's chests, causing their blood to surge. Watching all of this, Yusef was incredibly excited. It was finally complete. The true offspring of the great master of the Thousand Eyes was about to be born. Suddenly, there was a loud bang from the outer area, the sound of iron doors being blown open. It seemed that Eden had already reached the final level. So close. A lab worker rushed over in a panic, looking at Yusef. Lord, the king's court forces have broken in, but the chaos embryo still needs more time to hatch. Before he could finish, blood spurted from the worker's chest as he collapsed to the ground. Yusef calmly wiped the blood off his dagger and tossed the silk handkerchief away. I know, and next time, don't speak so loudly to me. The handkerchief drifted down, covering the face of the lifeless worker. Yusef gestured with his eyes, and the cyborg guards behind him unsheathed their blades, slashing at the remaining lab workers. The sacrifice ritual was already complete, these people were no longer needed. These weak, lowly mortals had no right to witness the birth of the offspring of the great master of the Thousand Eyes. In no time, the cyborg guards slaughtered all the remaining lab workers in the area. The black-robed cultists seemed oblivious, fully devoted to their prayers to the great master of the Thousand Eyes. The mixture of desperate screams and the cultists' chants was truly beautiful. Afterward, Yusef led the cyborg guards quickly to the other side of the incubation area. There were over a dozen spheres covered with black cloth. Yusef and the cyborg guards each approached a sphere and yanked the cloth away. Before them were flesh balls, entangled with dark eyeballs and tendrils of flesh. These flesh balls resembled the chaos embryo in the giant tank but were much smaller, merely byproducts of the chaos embryo. Without hesitation, Yusef placed his hand on the flesh ball in front of him. Instantly, blood tendrils spread from within, penetrating his palm, and then more tendrils wrapped around him, pulling him completely into the flesh ball. The cyborg guards did the same, each being drawn into the flesh balls. The blood tendrils burrowed into their bodies, causing them to twitch and howl in pain. Inside the blood spheres, Yusef's body twisted and convulsed uncontrollably. He gritted his teeth, forcing himself not to scream. This process was far from perfected, he hadn't wanted to use it. But time had run out. Since Eden dared to challenge him, Yusef would show him what real power was. While Yusef was struggling in agony, Eden and the Imperial guards stormed into the incubation area. Just as they entered, the glass tank outside shattered, releasing grotesque creatures that howled and charged at them. Carter stepped in front of Eden, drawing his chainsword. Draw swords. The Imperial guards lined up, drew their chainswords, and turned the valves, injecting the promethium fuel into the engines, causing the chains to spin and roar. Then, they rushed forward and swung their swords. Working in coordination, the guards hacked the monstrous creatures apart, sending flesh and blood flying. One cunning mutant hid in the shadows, its cold, vertical pupils locked onto the group. It crouched low, muscles coiling with tension, then it leaped with incredible speed, heading straight for the most prominent figure in the middle. The mutant moved so fast that it appeared as a blur of shadow, catching everyone off guard. Its gaping maw was about to close around Eden. But Carter moved faster, raising his chainsword to intercept the creature's charge. With the roar of the chainsword, the mutant was sliced in half, from head to tail, its pieces flying behind the group. As expected of the chainsaw maniac, Carter always cleaved his enemies in two, leaving the scene drenched in gore. A true brute. Looking at the ruthless Carter, Eden couldn't help but be impressed. But being too brutal has its downsides. As Carter's violent slash cut through the creature, foul-smelling blood sprayed in all directions, evenly splattering everyone around. Especially Eden, who was drenched head to toe in the stinking blood. Governor. Carter immediately realized what had happened, panicking. The governor, such a noble figure, was now covered in this vile, stinking blood. What sacrilege! His limbs went weak as he hurriedly ran over, raising a hand to wipe the blood away. Are you all right? I'm fine. Eden raised a hand to stop Carter, then shook his body, causing all the foul blood to fall to the ground. His entire body, including his gleaming golden armor, remained spotless and immaculate. It turned out that, just as the blood was about to touch him, Eden had used his psychic powers to envelop his body, preventing any contamination. Though his physical constitution was excellent, he hadn't undergone augmentation, so he likely couldn't resist toxins as well as Carter and the other guards. After dispatching all the monsters, Eden led the Imperial guards toward the core of the incubation area. Thump, 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 thump. The heartbeat grew louder and clearer. Stepping into the core area, Eden finally saw the giant glass incubation tank and the horrific flesh mass inside. He had found it was the target. Eden immediately gave the order. Destroy the target. The Imperial guards raised their bolt rifles and fired at the giant glass incubation tank. Flashes of fire erupted from the gun barrels as rounds rained down, penetrating the praying black-robed cultists without them even noticing. The cultists fell, and the bullets struck the glass, the tails of the rounds still spewing flames, but they could go no further. Boom, boom, boom. Next, dozens of armor-piercing grenades exploded. When the smoke cleared, the giant glass incubation tank remained intact. The glass was too strong, even rocket-propelled ammunition and armor-piercing grenades couldn't break it. End of chapter. Check out my Patreon for plus 20 extra chapters on all my fanfics. For only $5. www.patreon.com/Zalum. Plus 500 power stones equals plus 1 extra chapter. Thank you for your support.
Thanks for listening.